Hello, Oliver Barker-Vormawor is my guest. On his X profile, it says law and policy consulting and systems thinker. He's also linked very intimately to the Fix the Country movement. I'm going to speak to him about his life and all that stuff that you're itching to hear about. Oliver, happy to meet you.
I appreciate it as well.
It's a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Let's start from the beginning. What was your childhood like?
My childhood reflects the name Oliver. My dad was one of those, at some point, had grown Pan-Africanist, and so I decided that nobody was going to get a non-African name. Okay, so I was Mause, my little sister was SNM. And I grew up with my dad for the most part. When I grew up later is when I came to discover that my parents separated when I was about 1 year old.
One?
Yes. And so I lived with my dad, I think, till maybe like 5, 6 for the most part, till I was 7. And I was introduced to reading very early on. And for some reason, the book Oliver Twist resonated with me. And it resonated not by Charles Dickens's fine writing, but for some reason, I felt like the child there, that he was an orphan. So we grew up with a father who traveled a lot, and we're living alone. And so for many times, I always say I'm the only one member of our cousins who has lived with every auntie. Because if my dad had to travel, I moved to this auntie till he goes from his travels and comes back and picks me up. So it felt unrooted in many ways.
Were those the mother figures in your life?
Those were the mother figures.
What was your mom?
The aunties.
What was your mom?
I had never found my mom till later on, later years. I knew she was alive, but my dad did not grant access to me, to her. And it was in those days that a person could get away with that sort of thing, when a man can say, my son is my son and you get out of the house, type of thing.
Wow.
And so that's essentially what he did.
Did he remarry?
Later on in life, yes. Okay. I think when I was about 7.
So you were being bounced around?
I was being bounced around my aunties.
Which parts of Ghana
Which is funny because even later on when Fix the Country comes up, folks, because one of my aunties lived in Pig Farm, folks there recognized me. And I would have been not more than 7 years old, right? And they recognized and were asking my cousins, this guy sure looks like that's your cousin who
used to stay with us.
Yeah, we used to stay with us. And I've actually met one of them during the shaman court when I was arrested, kind of found out, came to look for me and said, I knew you when you were a little boy.
Really?
From this thing. So yeah, I've lived.
Where have you lived? Pig Farm? Where else?
I've lived in Pig Farm, I've lived in Adenta, I've lived in Amedeka, near the eastern region. I've lived in Benokope, near Kope, and all the Tong areas around the Volta, Didome, so all those areas. I've gone from family to family because my family is originally from near the Sugape area. So all those villages, I've lived in almost all of them.
What did that do to your education?
It's strange because even when I was a child, right, I went to the boarding house at 2 years old.
Get out of here.
I'm telling you, I was 2 years old when I went to Gideon.
Where's Gideon?
School. It's in Somanya.
Boarding school at 2?
Yes, I was in boarding school.
Do you have any memories of that time?
I do. I have 2 interesting memories. Well, one, of course, is during supper, when all the kids would line up and would come for our rations and go and sit. In many ways, I'm telling you that's my life reflected on the twist. So I remember that vividly. And they used to tease me about the same thing about who wants some more. We did it was almost me making that. And the second one was apparently when I used to wake up as a kid, like in the middle of the night, I wake up and I wake other people up and be chatting to the little kids. And the housemaster then beat me up one day and slapped me.
How old were you?
Oh, I was a child. I left there when I was less than before 4. And in fact, so my dad was then invited to the school. And when my dad came to the school, the headmaster was there. My dad was there. They were talking about me. And I walked up in front of my dad and slapped him back.
You slapped the headmaster back?
I slapped him back. And that's when I was taken out of the school.
Your action started when you were 4.
No, then with the parental presence there, then I felt like, okay.
This is my moment.
But yeah, I remember it very vividly. I remember we used to...
You slapped the guy, what did he do?
I can't remember that.
But you remember slapping
I remember the slap. I remember it's even talked about to today in the family. I remember, being visited while I was in school with You know, there was an era where those colored breads
Yes.
were a big thing in Ghana.
Yellow.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember it's almost like a rainbow thing in
Yeah.
the middle of the bread. I remember it being visited and brought that. I remember we used to have the toilet facilities were the one they had dug the hole and they had the sticks across them. I remember when young boys from the school went to kill a snake and went to drop it in there. For life, I was afraid of going in there.
Yeah.
I remember all those stories. You know, it's strange. But yeah, I lived there when I was very young. We moved. Then my dad lived in Odumasi. He used to work for the Land Valuation Board in Odumasi. So I attended the land school in Odumasi as well.
Okay.
Till I think I was supposed to be going to class 1 when I was taken to Krobo State College, which is in Pong. And I was supposed to be, so I was in class 1, third term. And when we went to the school, my dad brought me and told them, okay, I need to take an exam. So they have to interview me. So when they asked me, what class are you? I said I was in class 3. I was in class 1. So they made me write a test. And then, okay, I guess class 3 it works.
So you went to class 3?
I went to class 3.
You didn't do class 2?
No.
You didn't do class 1?
No, my dad didn't even know that I had been pushing class 3.
Why did you do that?
I don't know. There was always a sense of mischief. I swear. But yeah, so...
How could you survive in class 3?
And so it ended up that by the time I was out of high school, I was barely 16.
Yeah.
Because I had
the jump.
Sort of jumped myself. Obviously, when my dad found out, he didn't really like it, but it was too late at that point. You know?
Moving around multiple schools, I'm just curious, did you pick up any other languages? What languages did you speak?
I mean, I can speak Krobo, I can speak Ga, of course. A little bit of Fanti, I dabble here and there, but it's also connected to Akan, and then obviously Ewe. Yeah.
What were the key moments in your life up until 16? But before even that, the Oliver, did you name yourself?
I did name myself, and then it became part of my name. Everybody called me Oliver because it's just... But you know what's funny? Even as a child, I never told people where that came from. Like why I was calling myself Oliver. You know, because there's an almost sense of both sadness, but also it is accusatory in some ways. Because it was reflecting the childhood I felt I was having, which I don't think you can explain that in a grown-up conversation. You know, so yeah, it was my little secret in my head as to why the name came about. I used to be teased because I liked food a lot. Everybody assumed it was because of food and I wanted food.
Want some more.
I want some more. But the real reason why that came to be, it was nothing to do with that. You know? And of course, when I grew up, I mean, in other circles, I would joke and say, oh, actually, it came from Oliver Cromwell.
The British.
And the British and the fact that he overthrew the monarchy and things like that. But no, those are reservationism that perhaps I'm trying to align a different story to kind of the activism and things we're doing. But the core of it came from a very sad place.
How early did you name yourself Oliver?
Must have been at most in class 4, at most.
Did you have any resentment against your father?
You know what?
For sending you to boarding school and...
Listen, no. A young man grows up adoring their father. I adored my dad. I mean, he was the only person I lived with. He introduced me to books. I mean, even in his absence, I wanted to make him proud. And making him proud was being able to hold critical conversations. You know, I wanted him to see my take on stuff. And I could, even as very young as I was, when I was being analytical on anything, I can see from the corner of my eye the smile on his face. I left for that. So I put a lot of industry into how much more I read in order that I could impress him, you know. But the more, a young man grows up, you grow up idolizing your father, and at some point you rebel against your father and everything he stands for. And at some point, his worldview no longer matched my own views.
What was his worldview?
You know? I mean, my dad is a very patriarchal man who believes in a certain way of things in terms of, you know, what the place of a woman is and things like that. I don't think we are aligned in that regard anymore. I think that, I mean, my dad was one of the, you know, during the transition to the democracy, my dad was was the first elected assemblyman for Akusi America in those areas. And so his view of politics was one that, yeah, you join the status quo and whatever it is. But interestingly, I remember that I was of age. I was out of high school and I was traveling with him, and I asked him a question: why don't you run for office? why don't you stand for elections as an MP? And he says, why should I stand when I have a seat in my home? And I've always remembered that. And in many ways, it became almost a defining thing for me. For he made it was an off comment. I think he was being clever, but stand and sit type of thing. But it became defining for me as to what a person exposes themselves to. When home is comfort for whom it says, why do you expose yourself to that? Indeed. And it depoliticized me in the sense of I don't want to be in elected office. There's a sense of security in not offering oneself up to that. But in many respects, he's still a kind of person that why don't you love me for positions? Why are you doing it? What's the point of this?
Yeah.
And it's sort of the traditional African parent as well. I give this example where I say a lot of times people look at me and say, oh wow, you've gone through this, you've done that, and things like that. And for me now, I live my life almost in rejection of that, because it seemed to be what the African parent defined as success. Success was accumulation of degrees and not much integrity. It doesn't really matter. You have to make it, you have to do this thing. There's not a lot of empathy that embeds it. In fact, you have to hoard. And I was exposed to other people young people, brilliant people who would leave home and go live off grid because they were worried about the environmental footprint.
Right.
Those are values that started meaning a lot to me. A person's desire to live in harmony with nature.
Environment.
Those are things that we don't particularly develop environmental consciousness.
Indeed.
But in many respects, I have to thank my dad for them as well, because it was a discovery of new knowledge that has led my thinking to kind of question and question him, question everybody, right?
System, everything.
So yeah. So I think that the greatest value any parent can give a child is that they question you, that they evaluate and find themselves away from you, and they're entitled to that journey and that project, I think.
Sure. I'm just curious about your sister, because you mentioned her.
Yeah.
When you were being shipped around, was she moving with you?
No, so I was 7 when my sister was born, my little sister. And so in many ways we had different life experiences, because when I left Ghana as a 16-year-old boy from Morocco, he was, I think, about now turning 9.
Yes.
Now, by the time she had come in, my stepmom then became a stabilizing influence, right? She kept the home, even in my dad's travel. So she didn't have to move around with my dad or anything. She had a more stable upbringing. But because I was also away, I was away in Morocco for like 6 years. Those were her maturing years, So when I came back, she was already in high school at Mary's. And I'd come back, I started working on the Constitution Review project at the time. And I didn't do university in Ghana, so I had very little friends within particular this thing. So my weekends, I would pass by every weekend going to Mary's to go and sit with my little sister. And in many ways, I was disturbed by the child I'd come back to find.
Well, how has she changed?
Because, as a young kid, I found her very curious. And in many ways, she stayed young in my imagination, even as I went about. Even in terms of letters we exchanged. Obviously, those days, there was no WhatsApp. There was nothing you kept in touch.
Letters.
We wrote letters to each other. I came to find a child who was so hell-bent on religion and read nothing but religious tracts. That disturbed me. It just felt, again, a narrowing. So I felt it was my responsibility then. But then also I needed a companionship. So every weekend was my most exciting thing to wait for, to go and visit her and sit with her and push her and talk about her and things like that. That eventually I think she started resonating to that the person she became is a person I'm extremely proud of. And she credits a lot of that to me as well.
What has she become?
Not even professionally, more in terms of
the thinking,
her outlook on life, the things she says about other friends, like she can't believe she was here as well, right? Like she's become more involved. She gives me a very funny example. So she ended up in geological engineering. And when she went to work in the mines, she said they were in the process of, digging. And then they came across a rock when divided into two, had a cross sign in there. And all her other colleagues were like doing the cross sign. And she's like, but this is a geological formation. Like, I don't understand why we are creating religiosity over
What is natural?
what is natural, right? Like, so yeah, in many ways, she also started on her own path.
Or maybe back in the day, she would have thought that.
Oh,
that
absolutely. Back in the day was because that was example. You see, what you are given to emulate is what you do. So when you think about in terms of our high schools, those who becomes boys prefect and things like that, they're probably also very strong in scripture union. Like they give you the kukata image of this is what a good child looks like.
Yeah.
And so she was emulating that, and a lot of the times, particularly when it comes to even how we socialize women, where our sense of morality becomes even higher of what a good girl is and what that, they start picking those up. And so they don't challenge their own views, they don't challenge the world around them and things like that. So yeah.
Okay. I know where the Mause comes from. So your father gave that name.
Yes.
I know where the Oliver comes from.
I mean, I always say about the Mause, not to cut you, that it's strange to me that my parents called me Mause.
Which means God has heard.
Yes. So in some regard, I'm an answer to a prayer.
Yes.
And a lot of times when people ask me about, so what do your parents feel about this? Well, I said, well, I don't know what prayer they prayed for, but this is the answer they got.
Yes, that's all.
So this is what they asked.
Mause.
Yes.
God has heard.
Absolutely.
Oliver, you gave yourself.
Yeah.
Where does the Barker come from?
So the family, you see, the family was originally, the family name has changed a lot. The family was originally Chachu.
Okay.
And one of the things I came to understand is that before colonial contact, the concept of last names were not a thing, right?
Yeah.
So Chachu was the first name. You became a son of Chachu. And so when you started going to school, then they might call you something and add your father's
Chachuvi or something.
Something's name to it, right? So it changed from Chachu and went to Ajono because that's what my great-grandfather's first name was Ajono. And so then the children started being called Ajono. And so there's still a Ajono family, which are connected to the Vormawors. And my grandfather, direct grandfather, his name was Vormawor. And Vormawor was his first name, and his children took on the Vormawor. So there's no, as far as from where they come from, there's no Vormawor family as such because it came from my grandfather's first name. And of the children, my father was named Bernard Barker. And what I came to understand from my uncles was that the name was originally supposed to be Baraka, which is Arabic for grace.
For grace, yeah.
And that became anglicized as Barker. And then became the Barker-Vormawor. Okay. So
interesting idea.
Yeah, it didn't come from any, not like the Fantis or any of those that had direct colonial contact, but it came from Arabic Baraka.
You talked about going to Morocco, but that was after you finished high school.
Yes.
Where did you do high school? What was that experience like? How did it mark you?
So I went to school in Akosombo Akwamwan. It's strange because I remember when I was going to high school, I had been put in business to go do business, right? And I didn't like it at all. I said I didn't want to do this. And they said, well, that's all you're going to do. Incidentally, one of my father's friend's daughter had gotten general arts. And when I went to school, I always said that I wanted to do politics. I had no real sense. I just wanted what would give me politics. And so when I saw that the school had arts and they had government, I said, that's the one I want to do. And that's actually how I ended up making the decision as to wanting to do this. But, my first protest was in high school, incidentally.
Long before Fix the Country.
Yeah, way before. And I don't think I even had the words then to call it a protest.
What were you protesting about? Or against?
So, I mean, I've obviously known there as one of those kids with an opinion. And I did have an opinion, And what had happened was, in our final year, I think, some students would step out of the dining hall with plates of food, which we are not supposed to do. So they met the headmistress, and the headmistress then asked them to kneel down all around her. Then by evening, we heard that all of them had been debotanized.
For taking food out of the dining hall?
For taking food out of the dining hall. There's about 15 of them. And so it seemed so wrong to me that I then went to see the then dining hall prefect, because we're going for the evening dining where we'll congregate again. Were you an elected official? I wasn't prefect, nothing. No, I wasn't.
Monitor, nothing.
I wasn't any of those. I wanted to be, and it's interesting, I'd wanted to be how do we call it? There's the other one, SRC.
Yes, Student
Student
Representative
Representative
Council.
Council. I was going for president, but then the school chose the leaders.
What?
Like because I think I was the only person who had applied and decided that.
So there was no vote.
But maybe not this boy.
So the school authorities chose
the person who was. No, they decided that year that the head boy was automatically the head of the SRC as well. So, but yeah, so we had a conversation with the Daniel prefect, and once we got in, one of my colleagues then stood up. Immediately, people sat down, rang the bell, and said, "Listen, anybody, this is what has happened to our colleagues over food. We have decided that we are not going to eat the food, but if you want to go ahead and eat it, it's on your conscience."
What happened?
And then the room just exploded with everybody just chanting, "We no go chop. We no go chop." And it became known as the Operation We No Go Chop.
One time.
And then people just left it went on for 4 days. Like morning.
You were not eating.
We were not, the whole school was not eating.
Like a hunger strike.
Yes. Morning, afternoon, evening. They would make the food. We'll go sit there, this and that.
Wasted.
So the school was forced then to call. And it wasn't violent. It wasn't anything. It was just like a boycott of the food.
Was this a mixed school, boys' school?
It was a mixed school.
Mixed school.
And so the people then came. The school then organized like a town hall meeting that we need to figure out a way out of this. Incidentally, this happened over the weekend. So by the time the day students came to school, they then came to discover that over the weekend there has been a hunger strike that has been holding.
Yeah.
And then some of the teachers as well who were some lived on campus and others came in, and one of them heard it and then went to classroom commending us. And so that even blew that thing more fire. It blew it up. So yeah, the meeting was hard. The school came and said, what is the condition for them for us to go back and eat? The room was silent. You could hear like a pin drop. Nobody wanted to speak up. And so then I went and said, fear of course.
Bell the cat. Who bell
the cat? Yes. And so I went and I said that we demand an apology from the headmistress and a recall of the students, or this is not going to happen. So the students were back.
They listened to you.
The students were back. So that's it was in those days you don't have the language of we are protesting. But it was just like, this is ridiculous.
How did that make you feel when you got what you wanted through this action?
Listen, my joy, let me tell you when my joy came. Like about a week later, I was walking past, and then I was walking past the headmistress, and she called me and it's like, "You are the one who said I should come and apologize to the whole school." I said, "Yes, I was." Just look at me and shake my head. I had such an internal blast of laughter within me, because what could you do, right? Like I think I reflect on that, and it's interesting to me the way in which people respond to.
Do you consider yourself as a bold and courageous person?
Absolutely not. And that's the funny thing as well. I think people are wired differently. I think I get quickly incensed by injustice. People have different reactions to things. And for me, there's something infuriating about injustice in itself. So a lot of the times it's coming from a place of a deep place of conviction that I don't understand why this should happen. And so I'm not necessarily reflecting on that this is an act of boldness that I'm undertaking.
You're reacting to the injustice.
I'm reacting to injustice.
Okay.
So that's a lot of the time that you may see me, that I feel so strong in the conviction that the person deserves or doesn't deserve this, that in those moments, it's not about life. It's about the principle of, So yeah, you can look at a lot of the things I have done or said or whatever it is, and you can see a reaction to something. I'll give you an example as we're talking about this now. A lot of the things that every time people ask me these days is that, but why did you go for the key of the police van? Things like that. It was that you have to pan around and see the full picture. Like, I don't understand why you'd be taking the van. It is not in your way and things like that. And in that moment, my sense that this is not right, that we must correct the wrong, becomes the driving factor in my thinking, So yeah, if I didn't end up in law, I don't know what I would be doing.
I'm just curious though, do you still have the key?
I should have kept it as a memento. My only regret is that I threw it back to them. But I should have kept it.
Let's take it back to you finish secondary school, and then you go to Morocco.
Yeah.
Why?
The idea of Morocco was accidental. It was something. Listen, and this is what a lot of people do not necessarily know. I come from a place of, a home of modest means. Nothing I describe and the places I've lived or life I've lived suggests there was any money at home. So even when I was in high school, my fees were being paid by the Ghana Scholarship Secretariat, one of those brilliant but needy scholarships. So even when I came out of high school, I had a great, but if they say there was no money at home to pay for my fees,
It's a fact.
I need that. Yeah, it's a fact, and I need to go and find where I can find the money.
Just pause. Had you met mommy by then?
So I met by my final year in high school.
What was that like?
So I had to take that journey on my own.
You
so
knew
when
where
I
she was?
Yes, I knew where she was. That I had to go and, in fact, when I finished JSS, is when my dad then took me to go and live with an uncle in Nungwa. I went to live with an uncle in Nungwa for some time, learning how to make pure water, because he used to make pure water.
So you know how to make pure water?
Oh yes.
How do you start?
No, listen. In those days, all we got was a filter, and then the water ran through the filter, and it come through the tap, and then you use the laminating thing to seal it, and that's all we did. It was like hand you press. That's all we did. Yeah. So I did that throughout after this thing, and my mom came there to look for me. And so when she came there, I met her, and then we went, and I went to stay with her. I got permission from my uncle.
What was it like meeting her? You had never met her before that time?
I've seen pictures of her. I've seen her at my grandmother's funeral. So I had an image of her, but we had never lived together or anything.
What was that initial moment like when you met her physically, beyond the picture?
It just felt right. It just felt right. And listen, my stepmom and I are a great number. We never really had that relationship to begin with. And I know that there's a lot of stories about step-parenthood and things like that. But now when I reflect on them, a child's rebellion also starts with those around. And so for me, the absence of a mother means that you fight the intruder. And so my relationship with her was always hostile. And that hostility came more from me, right? Not knowing how to. And also in some parts because African parents don't have the tools or skill set in how to deal with a child who, for loss of a sense of belonging, is reacting to. It's just, it's either you're a good kid or a bad kid. And so I became a bad kid, So how you deal with the younger, there's no therapy tools, there's nothing. It took maturing for me to kind of reflect back and realize that
you expressed anger against your stepmother.
I expressed consistent anger against her, and obviously she also did not have the skill set to be able to know how to deal with, and so I'm sure there's so many things that she also did wrong. But now when I reflect on it, I just know that we're both lost folks who were then put in a situation where they didn't know how to do.
Did she ever hit you
with it? No, no, she disciplined us as a kid. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary.
Okay. Like
if she did hit me, I don't think that every parent did so, but I would process it through my register like if I was a child.
Exactly.
You wouldn't do this. But I don't think that's necessarily fair. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of it, and the reason why I say this, I've gone back to reflect on a conversation. Once she and my dad were having problems, and they brought people in to speak, counsel or whatever.
Your stepmom?
My stepmom. Okay. And I was in there as well. And one of the complaints she had was that when she first came to be with my dad, I didn't know how to call her. Now, this information, this is not something I had memory of. She said that I didn't know how to call her, and my dad did not tell me how to call her.
Let me guess, you're not going to call her mama.
I don't know, you see, but I know that I grew up calling her sister. Now, this is how I came to find out how I started calling her sister. So she brought her little brother to come live with us. He called her sister.
Of course.
And that's how I ended up calling her sister.
Yeah.
So I always called her sister. And that was the name I knew for her. The only difference between me and her brother was that if she called his name, he would respond sister, but I would respond ma. But I called her sister actively. So it was then that I found out. So you see, there's a lot of nuances of how you bring a person in, integrate a child and things like that. I'd lived with my father the whole time. So this person was new. I didn't know who this person was.
So you reckon daddy should have said, this is...
I reckon that if he had,
yes,
these are things that I reflect on today as to, what it means to be a parent, what it means to be able to anticipate the emotional needs of a child and how do you do this. I don't think that this was very much in vogue in those days at all. So yeah, today I can look back on them and understand that, listen, there was a lot of mistakes and a lot of misunderstanding in those days. Yeah, but when I went to live, when I live with my mother. It just felt right, but we still live under the burden of distance.
Yeah. Did you ever blame her for those years that you were apart?
No, I've tried. I mean, I've tried to have a conversation with her about it, right? And like I said, I excuse her because I know the kind of person my dad was. It's like he'll put his foot on the ground. So I knew that it was more my father's doing that I didn't get to live with her than hers.
You blame him?
I don't know.
No.
It's not a blame register. It just kind of, I just understand, like I talk about patriarchy, understand the dynamics with which they dealt with things.
So you're not angry, you're not bitter?
I'm not angry. I just had a different life experience, you know? But yeah, I mean, there's loss that one grieves, right? Like the distance between my mother and I is loss, you know? And no matter how much I try to get over it, there's just something there that we don't have.
It's a long time, man.
It's a long time, you know? And,
Boarding school
and then I left as well.
Yeah.
I was out of the country for a long time. And it just never developed.
Okay. I like this detour. Back to the road to Morocco.
Yeah.
Sounds like an AFCON something. The road to Morocco. How did you get on the road to Morocco?
So yeah, so Morocco became, okay, there was a scholarship advertised. And for a kid like me, who needed to figure out where money would come from, I just kind of went in for it, you know? And in fact, I only also found this out later. When I'd interviewed, they had asked me how old I was. At the time, I was 16. And I said, oh, I'm about turning 18. And then they made the decision that, no, you're too young and that we can't send under 18 folks there. Apparently, there was somebody who was there who had so admired my interview that even when my name was taken out, he inserted it back.
Put it back in.
You know? And so it was by chance that I ended up on scholarship and ended up studying in Morocco. And
what did you study in Morocco?
So I went to Morocco very much interested in the Middle East.
Okay.
You know, like the politics of the Middle East and understanding the Israel-Arab conflict.
This is in what year? What year?
This was in 2003.
Okay.
You know? And no, when I got there, I ended up, because I always wanted to do law. Well, I didn't always know. That also came sometime around when I was a young boy. But yeah, and so when I went there, I was like, oh, you can do law undergraduate here. At the time, it was only postgraduate at the University of Ghana.
Yeah.
And so then I became interested in that. And so I ended up doing French civil law. Then, I mean, obviously, even at the time, I had no understanding that in Ghana, they had the common law. And then there they had the civil law. And so perhaps one of the few, if not only, Ghanaian lawyers who has done the civil law, French civil law, and then the common law.
What language did you study in?
French.
Okay.
So I had to take 6 months of French.
Don't you, Paul?
Très bien même.
Okay.
You know,
Awesome.
So I did French for 6 months, and then we started university. And I always say, I will never forget, the first class we had was a constitutional law class. And the lecturer came in and started with current affairs, you know. By the time I was done with the class, I thought it was still on current affairs. Like my vocabulary was so poor. Like it was difficult. I mean, you're going to do law. Even when you speak English throughout your whole life, I'm going to do law. It's not
technical,
easy. Yeah, it's very technical, you know. Yeah, but I did that in Morocco for my undergraduate, specialized in my last year in international relations in law, and then did a master's in international law. So it was in Morocco.
Still in Morocco.
Yeah.
So for 6 years. What was the highlight of your stay in Morocco?
I would say I came to enjoy Morocco the best during my my master's years. But in fact, during my first years there, at the time the Ghanaian ambassador there was Kwabena Annan, then brother to Kofi Annan. So Ambassador Annan, in fact, I credit a lot to, because when I went in there, of all the students that were there, he just took a kind of liking to me, maybe the way I spoke, the things I said. And so he kind of made sure that every event that was organized, I would be there, fraternizing with the diplomats and all kinds of things, you know. And he really, really liked me and perhaps maturity as well. So yeah, I enjoyed the sense of being in. And remember, my whole life as a child, I lived for intellectual takes that would make my dad smile, you know. So in many respects, it became a knack of me to be able to hold court, you know, and yeah, and that's kind of how, one of the things I consider as a highlight from Morocco is the kind of mentoring relationship I had there. And surprisingly, he had left Morocco before I came back to Ghana. And when I came back to Ghana, I got about some months later, I got a call from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that a Ghanaian diplomat had recommended me to the ministry, that they think that I would be good for the ministry. And it wasn't even him; it was the ambassador after, who had very little interaction with, but he had highly recommended me, and that kind of set up. Later on, I ended up at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Okay.
On the recommendation.
I'm just curious. What was because you're African, and then Morocco has Arab population as well.
Yeah.
What were those relations like? Was there a time you
listen? The next day I arrived in, and Morocco is when young kids were chasing and throwing stones at me. And that was jarring. That was very jarring.
Because you were what? Strange.
Because you were black.
Stones.
Yes, that was very, very jarring. I mean,
Did you have to run?
Oh yes, I mean there was a group of us. It was very strange.
All black people.
Yes, black people. It was myself and a couple of others. That was the very next day after I arrived.
Welcome to Morocco.
Yeah, and because then you become aware of your blackness.
When you're in Ghana, you couldn't really tell.
Yeah, it's not something that you
because we're all black.
It's something that you reflect on. But your experience of that was my first kind of politicizing of blackness that I experienced in terms of Moroccan society, and sort of the overt racism of the place. I mean, one of our lecturers when I was in university comes into class and is talking about how we in Morocco believe that you black people stink.
What?
Say that in there's no. This is one of the things that I found really interesting when I lived in the US, which is that because the US had a long history of race, they've had so many conversations around race that they knew what was out of place, even if they were being racist, right? So that's why a white person may look over their shoulders before they said nigger,
Just to see who is around.
Yes, in Morocco, they didn't have that. That consciousness did not exist. It was just and that same thing exists in Ghana as well. Like when you think about young kids seeing a white person and chasing the Obronic or call my chin, there's a lack of sophistication around this is jarring. Now, of course, because whiteness tends to be in the political majority worldwide, we rationalize it differently. But if they were a minority, it would be different. And I imagine that even if, Chinese folks within our society and the reaction towards them, it comes from a place where there's a lack of conversation around different identities and things like that. So the society hasn't developed the skills and tools to know how to be nuanced.
Did this overt racism affect you in any way?
The first time I was there, I said, no, I needed to come back.
You wanted to come back home?
No, I was like, this is ridiculous. In fact, even as I was going there, I knew I was doing the brave thing by going to study in some other society. But I still was regretting the loss of the University of Ghana experience, of the vandal and all those stories we heard when we were growing up and everybody wanted to go and experience it, right? Like that's where, political consciousness was formed. And listen, I was a person who did history and read a lot. So I knew the role of the student movement and things like that. I was excited about it, So to give that up for Morocco felt like twice a loss. And then come up into a society where it's like, what is all of this? It just kind of felt like I needed to go back home. But who was going to pay my flight? In fact, when I went to Morocco, I had $110 in my pocket. And at the time I was going, I thought that it was the biggest money. By the time we got there, we need to do administrative processes. Went to take a passport picture, which took away $30 out of that. And I had no stipend. That was like all I had.
You were watching your wealth disappear.
I was watching my wealth literally disappear, And but my dad had to go and see friends and beg for them to be able to fund, because you have to pay your own passage, So
you flew with which airline?
Alitalia at the time.
Okay.
Alitalia, we have to go through Milan and then come back down again to the continent. It's bizarre to think about it now, but it wasn't joyous when I first went there. Just sort of those experiences. And I always used to tell my Francophone friends that Morocco was a right step or a wrong step in the right direction. I always used to say that.
How do you mean?
Because it felt like a necessary evil, but in the time I was taking that step, it just felt like this is not what I should be doing, right? Now, full circle. When I went to Harvard, the very day of orientation, some folks on faculty came and looked out for me. And they said, well, we're really interested in meeting you because they're the first person who we have admitted was come from Morocco. And it was a point of interest to them that stood out for them in terms of my background, to see a young African kid who left for Ghana and went to live in Morocco and studied there and now coming to Harvard. And I was just like, listen, I didn't know that it would be a point of intrigue later on. And today I'm very grateful for it, even if in those, I'm not grateful for the racism, but I'm grateful for having grown up away from home.
Were there some bright spots? What were the most exciting, happiest days for you in Morocco?
Oh, I can listen. Some anecdotal, some trivial and funny nonetheless. But I do remember when the first girl I was trying to ask out, Halima from Niger.
Okay.
And I was now learning French. And I would sit there trying to conjugate verbs in my head and speak to her. And she was from Niger and she spoke Hausa. And I regretted that all those times all we learned in Hausa were insults. Like I could have used that as a medium to communicate. But I remember it. And I always talk about friends that, that I saw that love vanish. And it always reminded me, because I did literature, right? Like when Romeo was talking to his cousin and he wanted to introduce him to other ladies and said, I'll make your swan a crow. So like the love will then, and I saw her eating, those things when it rains, I don't know whether the termites.
Yeah, the termites.
The ones that fly on the rain.
We call it afflicity.
So I saw her eating that because they had fried it and they were eating. It was a delicacy from Niger. And I looked and said, what the F is this? That's when my swan became a crow.
And you forgot about the love, man. Forgot about
that. But listen, I loved, because when I went there to Morocco, I felt like that's when I really matured, because there was a Ghanaian community there as well.
All right.
I was
what were they doing? Apart from students? All students?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was subsequently elected president of the Ghanaian Students Association there. And like in those years, I was definitely the youngest among the group, but the path towards from mischief to leadership happened for me in Morocco. In other times, it was just like, there's a cuteness with which people view a smart-ass kid. You know what? And for me, it was always mischief, but never a sense of responsibility. But in Morocco, I could see myself changing.
Okay.
I could see the journey from, this bubbly, outgoing kid who cared about nothing, being now more particular about what I wore, how clean I was. When you grow up, one of the things about growing up in a poor home as well is that you end up wearing so many tattered shoes that even the concept of looking fresh, it's beyond your means. So it doesn't even. But in Morocco, I started internalizing how I present, I presented and what I did. And I remember like even young boys at the age where, piercings and things like that, I would always say to myself that, no, I'm raising myself essentially here. And I won't read about what tomorrow might look like.
Indeed.
And so while I still wanted to be cool, so I would use a magnetic earring and go out of a party, but I would never pierce. Like
in the morning you can take it off.
In the morning I can take it off, So I say that I raised myself, and it was a maturing moment for me to be away from parents, and you didn't have even, if I would communicate with parents, it's an email, an odd email. Yeah, my dad, an odd email like there. So you had no parental influence, and you had to figure out how to grow
Check yourself.
And that, and getting into student leadership also. Immediately then, other young students also looked up to me, right? So yeah, I look back on it fondly as a moment where I became different, and I could feel that difference when I came back to Ghana, and I would speak to other university students and things like that, and I realized, no.
It's a big difference.
Yeah, it was a bit different, I felt.
Did you lead any protests in Morocco?
I didn't,
That was your sabbatical.
No, Morocco was in many ways a sabbatical, but in Morocco too, I became quite more interested in academic brilliance. And before then, I was more interested in reading and expanding my brain, but not necessarily that I needed to do well on a test. It was never part of, because in many respects, in some respects, it felt effortless. And so it was not a virtue for me. Like even throughout school, I would shy away from those kids who were studious and book-oriented. I'd hang out with kids who weren't. So it was a serious item of identity for me not to be seen, not to reflect smartness on the book. But in Morocco, because I was removed from all those things, and I had to do twice as much because I didn't understand the language, I needed to prepare more to be able to learn and have the linguistic skills to be able to express and write a paper that you know, a lecturer would read and think that this is deserving of, you know, a first
Good
class or type of good, you know. So I became more focused and interested in.
Did you do well in school in Morocco?
I did. I did very well in Morocco. And that came with a lot of industry, to be honest. I tell you, my first years in the law faculty, I would imagine all the possible ways in which a question could be asked on any course I was taking. Okay. And I would prepare the answers ahead of time because I needed to have a French-English dictionary to be able to write it out and prepare. So I would prepare all my answers. If I would imagine that how many ways can a question be answered, I'd have to pre-prepare it ahead of time. You know, it was only later years that I became more comfortable in the language that I could work in. But it then put a due discipline, which I didn't have in me through that process.
What did you think you learned in Morocco that has impacted you up until today?
One of the things that I find big for me in many ways is tolerance. I give this example. I was talking to a friend. No, my partner here when I met her. So she's not Christian. She's atheist. And I was telling her that when I first went to Morocco, I always felt that anybody I was talking to felt like they were trying to convert me.
To become a Muslim?
To become a Muslim, right? And then she said to me here, but how do you think I feel in Ghana? You know? And it didn't dawn. Many ways now, the biggest values I take from Morocco is reflecting back on things that seem bizarre and odd, but that have shaped my outlook and thinking in terms of how, because I have been the other in a different society before. Like I told somebody, like I sat in a classroom, and for the first time I understood how I used to be in class with people in Ghana, and I don't understand why after all this they didn't understand. Like I felt a dumb kid in the class because I'm struggling with a language. And
how big are the classes and how many black people in the class?
Oh, the classes were not, well, it depends on some of the programs. But most classes would be about 20 or 40. It's not a lot of, because they're different courses.
Okay, and how many Africans?
Africans might be maybe 8. Francophone Africans, there might be Equatorial Guinea.
So black Africans.
Yeah, there are black Africans as well.
Okay.
You know, and yeah, I felt, and they were like, these were Francophones.
Yes.
They spoke the language,
Yes.
so they were fine.
Yeah.
You were the Anglophone kid who was struggling to be able to make his way.
Were you the only Ghanaian on that program, on your program?
Yes, yes. Later on, somebody joined. But yeah, for the most part, I was.
Did you ever come back to Ghana while you were in the 6 years old? Never.
Never. Not
So,
even once.
so you come back to Ghana. What's your impression of town?
So you know what's interesting?
Okay.
So before I left Ghana, I mean, you know, I was a kid who was politicized quite early. I was introduced to this conversation, and I used to say that I adored Nana Akufo-Addo. In those days, it was my measure. And I always come from a person who was always suspicious of power and rebel against power. So in those years when I was growing up and Rawlings was in power, I felt more affinity with the opposition, you know, and then he was one of those opposition figures. And so everybody who knew me thought that, you MPP, even before a time when, you know, those words had any true meaning. But when I came back, it all just felt silly to me. The entirety of our politics felt silly. It just felt like, yes, I lived in Morocco and it was an African country, but it was way developed as an African country, right? It was a different way of thinking in terms of governing and things like that. That the division between our NDC and our MPP did not have any value to me when I could see the true state of the country, right? So, yeah, I became removed in many ways to be able to have the look of an outsider, the regard 3, on our politics generally, right? So in many respects, that was one of the first things that marked me. But one of the things that I found strange was that when people would hear my name, they say, you NDC. It was one of the first times that I'd come on age in Ghana, because I left Ghana before I was 18.
Okay.
And to see my ethnicity then become conclusive in people's minds.
Because of your Vormawor name. So
yes, because of my Vormawor name, right? Yeah, automatically they assume. At a point where none of those things meant anything to me. But I was seeing how things that I hadn't noticed because I was young in this society. The ways in which people just automatically politicize you or you know, assume you were a certain political orientation just by a person's name. Those started then, ethnicity and those relations that were obscured from view for me when I was a child, I could see them more now. And those all seemed Yeah, they all seem quite strange to me, I think.
So you came back, still on Alitalia?
No, I came on Royal Air Maroc.
Okay.
I came on Air Maroc. Then Royal Air Maroc was flying direct.
Yes.
Direct to Ghana.
Indeed.
Yes.
And you land out. So what do you do? I mean, you have your 6 years, you have your master's.
So I came, when I came, before I came in, one of my uncles who lived in Boston said, oh, there's this young kid who, when he came to Harvard, came to live with me. Now he's executive secretary of the Constitution Review Commission. So
in Ghana? Yes,
in Ghana. So what do you want? Do you want to write to him and see whether you're interested in that? So I sent Raymond Atuguba then a mail where I said I was interested in, what they were doing and things. He said like, yeah, but we don't have any money. I said, that's even perfect for me because I'm coming back to Ghana and I need to do my national service. So I don't mind, So then, he said, sure, then come. So then when I came in there, it was with the intention to do national service. And then also, I wasn't trained as a Ghanaian lawyer. I was coming to the Constitution Review Commission. I had already a French civil law and I did a master's in international law that I was coming with. Within the first month, he had given me an assignment to write on something. And so when I wrote, I think he was very possibly surprised at the analytical rigor of what I'd written, that he insisted that no, a job had to be given to me.
Straight up.
There and then, just based on the one thing he read. And then immediately had asked me, before the Constitution Review Commission, he had a consulting firm, Law and Development Associates, whether I wanted to join it. So it just came from something like that. But when I came in, I came with my savings. I didn't have friend networks, like I was saying. I needed to figure out.
You were working in Morocco?
No, it was my savings I had made. I wasn't working. I was on scholarship, so I'd saved up a bit of money. Listen, those days it was a lot of money in Morocco, but when I came here, it was $2,400. I remember. At the time, the dollar in Ghana was like 1.2 or something. So it was like
2009 thereabouts.
Yes, and it didn't seem like much. But in dirhams then in Morocco, it could do a lot because this is a place where I went back almost 20 years later, and bread is still the same price as I left it, when I first went there.
They've controlled inflation.
Like the prices don't change, in this way in which in Ghana, it will seem strange to us that we'll buy the same thing.
Bread is still the same price.
It's still the same price, dirham 20 cents, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Prices have not moved an inch in all the time.
Tell that to a Ghanaian.
I know, this is the concept we have. But yeah, I came in and then I now needed to figure out and understand what the society was made of. And it was a great introduction that I ended up at the Constitution Review Commission because it felt like the entire country was under review. And people would come and the things that people would write. I started now, getting then a sense of the governance in terms of
this must have been the Mills era, correct?
This was the Mills era.
Yes, indeed.
And we met everybody under the sun.
Did you ever meet Mills, President Mills?
No, I never met President Mills, but I did write for him, which is one of the.
Okay, what did you?
Because he addressed the Constitution Review Commission's national conference, and I wrote the speech.
Okay.
Because I was there. Everybody now comes to understand that I was the flowery person with words. So every speech they'll roll me out.
I have to go and look for that speech.
So I wrote the president's speech.
Okay.
No, but that's not the speech I'm most proud of.
Which one are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of John Mahamed's address to Parliament after Mills had died.
You wrote that?
Yes. And of course, I didn't know him. He didn't know me. But Raymond Atuguba had been appointed executive secretary. He was advising Muhammad at the time. And of course, he knew me and what I could do. So he asked me to write it, and then he took it. So I'm not sure later on when I met him, I did mention it to him. And he remembered a line, which he said, it nearly made him cry, that he was my father, he was a brother, and was his son. Some line I put in there. But yeah, that was one.
What did you feel like?
Because in that moment,
watching him read it,
in that moment, I was channeling all I felt about the country into that speech. It is the most bipartisan speech I have ever felt any leader has ever said. Because I was coming from a place where I said, listen, Mills' death has to give us an opportunity for renewal. It was my own aspirations and desire for this country that I was pouring into that document. So I remember I was in Legon, and the speech had to go in the morning. I was being asked to write it in the night. To avoid dozing off, I was sleeping on the floor so I could wake up and I would get an idea. Because speech writing is hard. You write a paragraph, maybe it doesn't read well, maybe you read over it.
Right now, it's not the ChatGPT days.
No.
Back then it was raw.
You had to sit down and, craft it and tell a story to tell. And I would lie on the floor so that, the hard floor would then make
Motivate
the sleep uncomfortable and stand up again and work on it, and kept working it. But it felt like my opportunity to speak to the country.
Okay.
And my feelings were, can we just forget this partisanship? All of these means nothing. There's a bigger country. We need to reach across the divide, move on, and things like that. That was the
speech that you are most proud of.
Yeah.
And then when you finish writing it, do you read it out aloud to hear how it sounds?
Yes.
How do you do
of course. You see, one of the things is that
because it has to sound.
It has to sound
spoken.
Yes, it has to sound. And I didn't know him at the time, so it's difficult to channel him. Because later on, when I'm writing speech now, I'm trying to channel the person and how they would go about.
Would you listen to some of their speeches and can I hear what their rhythms are like?
But at the time, I didn't know him, so I was channeling myself.
Okay.
So I was speaking, and it sounded nice to me, and I would read it out loud, and the weight I wanted it to carry. And that was when I think he had used, how do you call that thing again?
The teleprompter.
The teleprompter for the first time. So it felt flowing, which was good.
Yes, he's looking at the camera.
Yes.
Yes.
So, and I remember, the joy that it gave me were people reporting on the speech and writing it. I just felt like, okay.
As the speech was being delivered, were you listening to it?
I was listening.
At the time,
I was listening to it.
Where were you?
Because I wanted to see how much was being changed.
Okay.
Or what had changed. Because I sent it off.
Yeah.
But I know that there was a paragraph or two added. And I don't know who added it. I don't know. Because I've been trying to find out. I don't know whether I'd heard it was Professor White or some people. But yeah, I know that a paragraph or two had been.
But you could still recognize the speech.
No, but I mean, yes, the speech was there.
Yeah.
Then a new paragraph will come in like, this is not my words. And that's the funny thing as well, because when you do write, even if it is 100 years, you are certain patterns of phrases that you would always know it's your.
Where did you listen to that speech?
I think I watched it on TV.
Oh, okay.
I watched it on TV. No, I was at the University of Ghana at the time.
Okay. Were you teaching?
No, I wasn't actually. So I was preparing for Makola to do this thing. So I was at the University of
Ghana School of Law.
Yeah. This was in 2012.
Yeah.
I think, right?
2012. July 24th is when he died.
Yeah.
How did you hear about President Mills's death?
Listen, by the time he died, to be honest, I was certain I was going to lose the elections in 2008, right? 2012 elections, because it wasn't 2008.
No.
I was certain that he was going to be a one-term president.
Why?
Because the temperature of the country and the whole thing about his health just kind of felt, a big thing going into the election, And so it just kind of felt to me that I'm not sure the NDC was going to win the election, kind of how I felt about it. And so, I wasn't I've never particularly been fond of any president. I think anybody will soon come to understand that, I'm always oppositional, because for me, once you're in leadership, okay, this is what our continuous ask has been. So my relationship with him was like, he could do more always, right? But his death was very sad, and the circumstances in which it was being talked about and things like that. It just wasn't the greatest, And now when you reflect back, obviously, on his legacy, it was a different kind of politician that I suppose we long for.
More academic.
Yeah, we definitely long for. Unfortunately, I guess his health also didn't allow him to be able to show us the fullness of himself. But yeah, his death for me just kind of felt like a moment. So it's the first time a president had died in office. Yes. And I thought I was hoping that we would seize it differently.
And then when NDC won the election in 2012, was that a surprise to you?
It was an amount of surprise, but it was a narrow win, right?
Yeah,
it was like 50 point something.
Even challenging the court.
Yeah, even challenging the court. At that time, I knew that, the death could help carry...
Sympathy votes, right?
Yeah, sympathy could help carry him. And I think it did help push him. But with the way things were going, I kind of felt that they were going to lose the elections there and there.
So you continue doing your studies for Makola?
So this would have been in 2013 is when, remember that when I first came to Ghana in 2010, the call I got from the Director of Administration at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs about somebody having recommended me. It's in 2013 that I get an email to go write an interview exam. And when I get there, there were like 5,000 people. I thought it was like, since somebody had mentioned it was some exclusive thing where they were headhunting. Oh, no, it was
lots of heads to be hunted.
Yeah, and so I almost even walked away. because we had stayed there forever. The exams was not coming.
5,000 people.
Listen, it was like White Big Hall in Tema or something. Like we're just there, like, and like I remember the sound of the big fans. I was just like, what is all this?
What questions were they asking you in the paper? What questions
I
were they
can't even
asking?
remember the question. Just like it just felt like such a, and yeah, I went to write it. Incidentally, I was one of those who were shortlisted to come for
All right.
to come for an interview.
Do you know how many they shortlisted out of the 5,000?
I think they shortlisted about 55, and they were looking for like
that's brutal, man.
it was very brutal, and they were looking for maybe like 14 or 15
out of the
or something.
5,000.
Yeah.
What kind of job was this?
16 people were picked up.
What kind of job was this?
And because like I was then interviewed for legal.
Okay.
There were like 8 people in legal. And mind you, at this time I was not even a Ghanaian lawyer.
No.
So they just saw my back. Okay, you did law in Morocco, and they went in. So even when I went for the interview, I just knew that, listen, I'm not going to be able to compete with a Ghanaian lawyer because I wasn't a Ghanaian lawyer. So I told them, listen, they asked me, I said, listen, you don't really need a lawyer. You don't have anybody. I don't know how many people you have here who have a background in international law, because I've done a master's in international law. And you are not entitled as lawyers and the ministry to go to court anyway. The Attorney General goes to court for you. So I am more interested in the academic side of the law. And so if that's something that's this thing. So that's kind of where I went it, because I was not going to be able to compete.
You were making a case for your employment.
I was making a case
Did you
for my
succeed?
employment. I did succeed, And it's funny because I still remember that interview quite well.
Who interviewed you?
It was like somebody from the head of civil service, some people within the organization, and like other retired diplomats there.
Did they do background checks on you?
Later on,
After when you're okay, all right.
So when I went in there, they asked me, first of all, the big question that they were asking everybody was, is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs part of the civil service or the public service?
Did you know?
Listen, the virtue of having then worked on the Constitution Review Commission came to being. Because when I say it was like reviewing the country, that being on the Constitution Review Commission gave me a cheat code for the country. So I said, but that question doesn't make any sense.
You told them that?
Why? I said, when you look at the Constitution, it lists the public services of Ghana to include the civil service. So the civil service is
part of the public service.
The public service. And then they looked at me for a while, and then somebody said, Ekra, answer.
Meaning what?
Like,
whatever it is, still answer. But you answered?
I said, okay, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is part of the civil service. Okay. But the question that stumped me was a question about what is the name, the name of the head of the civil service or something. Now, while we were sitting outside, like I was keeping mostly to myself, and when people would come in from the interview, like I would see people rush. Yeah, people were rushing. What did they ask you?
Culture.
And like, I have never really interviewed in Nero. I've been away from Ghana forever. So I heard them, they would mention the name, but I didn't really take interest in the thing. So when they asked me the question, there and then I blanked. Because I wasn't really listening to it. But so I was trying to recall it. And then I blanked and I sat there and I started laughing. And they asked me why. And I said, incidentally, anybody who comes out of this room, when people ask them, what question did you ask them? That's the one question they mentioned. And then for 10 to 15 minutes, they started talking, hey, these people, they don't know. What? They chatted among themselves. And then they came back to me. Okay, so what's the answer? By that time, I'd been able to recall it.
You bought time.
Yeah, but most of the questions interrogated my background, my interests, why I wanted to do this, and all of that. And then I went home. And then when I got the offer, I wasn't sure anymore if I wanted to do it. Because one thing I had not told them, that I wasn't interested in being called to the bar. In fact, I was preparing to do Makola. I was in the process of it, and I didn't know how this was going to work. I was teaching at the Kofi Annan Peacekeeping Training Center. I was teaching on their master's program then. And I was working for Law and Development Associates with Raymond. So it was like, how am I going to juggle all of this? And Raymond at the presidency had tried to get me into the public service. I was like, no, not interested. But I have trained in international law. And everybody, within my class that went to the foreign service to serve or whatever. It just kind of felt like that's what I trained for. And so I ended up accepting the offer and joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
How long did you stay with them?
With the ministry itself, 3 months.
Okay.
Work at the ministry itself 3 months.
Okay.
But as a staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I resigned when I left. I resigned after Harvard when I was going to the International Court of Justice. Because when I went there, Raymond then was insisting that I join him at the presidency because he had worked with me for whatever it is. And I said, the only way I'm doing this is if I'm a civil servant. So then he wrote to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs asking that I be seconded to work with him. So even though I was a staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and I went to the presidency as a civil servant, I didn't stay long in the ministry.
Why not?
Because, I was seconded.
Yes,
to the
but
presidency. And then when I left there, midway, Raymond resigns from the presidency.
Yes.
And then I was like, the only reason why I'm here, I'm not even a political appointee. I'm just a civil, because they're civil servants at the presidency. And so I also left and went to Harvard.
What did you go do in Harvard?
So I went to do a master's in master's in law.
Okay.
The thinking was that I wanted to do my PhD then. And for Harvard to do the PhD, you had to do the master's in law there first.
What was that like?
So that's when I left. So when I finished that, and I'll come back again. I will repeat the point. I'd gotten an offer from the World Bank and the International Court of Justice, and I decided to go to the International Court of Justice. Then the Ministry of Foreign Affairs wrote to me to come for my promotion interview. So I wrote to them and said,
okay.
And so that's how I resigned.
Okay.
But yeah, Harvard is when I went and I got involved in the protest movement again.
Before that, how easy is it to get into the Harvard program?
Because I applied at the time with a lot of naivete, I had only applied to 2 schools. I applied to Oxford and I applied to Harvard, and I got into both. So it was only when I was there that I realized that so many people had applied to so many schools as a hedge. And I just kind of do this thing. But the truth is, throughout my time in Morocco, anybody who knew me in Morocco will tell you that I was always working on my Harvard personal statement. Like I was constantly, because you remember the uncle I said Raymond had lived with, he had put the thoughts in my head then. And so I was constantly preparing for it, to apply for it all the time. Now I tell all the, like even now in the law firm, we have 2 of my juniors who I've guided and who are going to Harvard this year. I tell them that, listen, I was foolish at the time to think that I could only apply to this one school. There's so many people who apply and they're equally good but don't get in. So you always have to hedge your bets and apply to so many multiple schools.
Is it a personal interview or it's online? How does it work?
So
or the statement?
You do the personal statement. They have a different kind of personal statement. You have to take a problem and write about it and propose solutions.
What was your problem?
It was about corruption. Okay. So I wrote about corruption at the time when President John Mahama was in office, when he had announced that was the judgment debt era, So he had announced that if there was a judgment debt from the court, it had to come to the president to be approved first before they paid it out. And I reflected on that in terms of separation of powers and constitutionalism. I understand how the state must deal with the judgment debt becoming a form of money laundering of corrupt distance, because what you do is that you give a friend a contract, you cancel the contract, they sue the state, they get money for free. So I understood where that came from. I'm saying that, but do we have to suspend all the niceties of constitutionalism to be able to solve a problem of corruption? So it was a more philosophical reflection and also solutions around that.
How many words in personal statement?
You have 750 words for that part, and then 750 words on something more personal that connects your journey. Okay. So that I talked about, like my experiences growing up with my father, living in my father's shadows and moving away from those.
And then Morocco and all that stuff.
I didn't even think it was I never even reflected on it as a huge part of my application, I just only talked about growing up as a kid, in the house of an assemblyman, where people came to and brought their problems. And I grew up as the assemblyman's boy, and people still call me Assembly.
For real? That's one of your nicknames?
Yeah. Because my father is Assembly, so they call him Assembly.
So you've inherited the name?
Because Assembly.
Do you remember where you were when you got the news that you had gotten Harvard?
They send you. Yeah, no, I looked. Yeah, I remember. Because I was just about finishing. We're just about finishing Makola when I got the email, and my heart was racing because once the email pings in your thing, you know where it's from, and you have to log into the system to go and see
whether you've been accepted.
And then all I saw was the congratulations,
Nice.
and then that was it. It was surreal. It was surreal for me, and I went there and it felt like it fits like a glove. Well, just kind of intellectually where I needed to be, and it just kind of felt like the kind of conversations and environment I wanted to be in.
Do they pay for the education?
Yes, so I got it's essentially was almost a full ride because Harvard has this thing where their policy is that everybody must pay something towards their own education.
Of course.
So they give you a part of it in loan. So out of $86,000 for both, the tuition was 100%, and then they gave me some money for living expenses, and then I had to they gave me the rest of my living expenses in loan. So yeah.
And then you got involved in another protest.
I got
the Harvard protest. Tell us about that one.
I know. I mean, when I got to Harvard, the first time I sat in an orientation, they had like a week of orientations, and one of them was a video graphic history of the school, and they had the school's historian, the law school's historian, who was telling us about the school and the fact that if you look at the Harvard crest, that's the crest of the slave-holding family that donated money to establish the school. And I thought this was such a weird, fun fact. Like slave-holding family, you've used their crest for the school. It seems so bizarre to me. But yeah, again, protest was not a language that we spoke, right? And so it was when the South African protest exploded with Fees Must Fall.
Yeah.
And that was huge. The universities across the country were thinking of how to solidarize with South Africa and things like that. And so myself and another South African friend of mine in the school then sat down and talked about, we need to do something in solidarity with Fees Must Fall in South Africa. And so we then went around, she and I went to a couple of African students, and we called them and said, okay, let's think about this thing. What does it look like? What should we do? How should we do it? And in that moment, I said, but why are we solidarizing with South Africa when what South African students are calling for is decolonizing the universities themselves? And we have to think about Harvard itself cannot stand in solidarity with others if it has not cured itself. And so the conversation about slave legacy of Harvard, in terms of its representations around campus, and in terms of Black equity, in terms of legal studies and what it means for voices, non-mainstream voices to be represented in law, became then, okay, let's think about this and flesh it out. And so then we then called it Royal Must Fall, Royal being the slaveholding family. And that's how the protest was organized. Now, the process was interesting to me because when you go to Harvard, you then also realize that, no, you're not Black, you're African.
You're not Black.
Yes. So the Black Students Association existed for African Americans. And then there's the African Law Students Association, which existed for Africans.
But you're all Black.
And I remember when because during the orientation as well, the various societies and groups also set up, and you go and speak to people. And I remember going to speak to the lady at the Black Law Students Association, and she's saying, oh, the African one is over there, and so we had to go around.
Yeah.
We had to speak to the different groups, the Palestinians, the Jewish, we had to speak to the Black students, to be able to why they must support the protest we're trying to do.
Who gave you the toughest of times?
The Black Students Association.
Which is the African Americans.
Yes. The Black Students Association at the time didn't really get, and of course it's South African, where the genesis of this is coming from. A couple of them did join. And you can see, as we're doing this, so, okay, it became a question of, okay, what is the statement? Somebody said, oh, you seem to write well, go and write it. So I sat down and I wrote the thing. But then I had not processed, okay, so who is going to speak at the protest? And then everybody then started pointing at me.
Well, you wrote the speech now, you should go.
I should go and speak. No, it's not even a speech, it was a statement that we needed to announce the protest. I had written it.
Okay.
But then now I was being asked to go and speak. I'd never been at a protest to speak at a protest or what that looked like. And the pressure of it was, I remember Barack's speech when Harvard Law students were protesting, because we're going to do it at the same square.
Barack Obama.
Yeah. And I remember vividly, because I watched over and over again his speech and how eloquent it was. And it was like, man, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this
Can't-
in this space, right? Like, yeah, I remember. So when I went out,
But
my
you had a
speech
good
that
name. I
day-
mean, Barker is from Baraka, which sounds like Barack, man.
I suppose. But yeah, but I remember, but I wanted to capture the sense of student activism from those days as well. And I flopped. Like I don't know what I was saying half the time. It sounded like gibberish. But all of that is
Is that you
documented.
is you just thinking, I mean, you have really high standards, so it didn't quite hit what you thought it was going to be in your mind. Probably.
See, this is the thing. I went, and I don't do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I went into it with moral and righteous indignation. That, of course, it doesn't make any sense for we to have the crest of a slaveholding family that defines Harvard Law School. And I went at it like, everybody must understand why this makes sense. And so I wasn't convincing.
Yeah, making the point out.
Yes, I wasn't convincing. I was just like, well, if you don't believe that I don't know what's wrong with you type of thing. So that's how it went. Now I don't do that kind of speaking to people. Like, I'm always very explanatory. And a lot of people even say, but we don't understand some of the people you respond to on, like, even on your social media. It's something that I've always reminded myself that any time you get an opportunity to communicate, you don't do it from a vantage point of like, well, you better know it. Or
You don't assume.
yeah.
Okay. How many people attended this protest?
It wasn't the hugest of crowds, but we did get a couple of black students. There are pictures on my social media. I would say we formed a circle. We were not more than, if I'm being generous, 25. But it's what happened after. So after we announced the protest, the Wall Street Journal picked it up, the Washington Post, a couple of people picked it up. So the interviews were coming in. Then in reaction to what we had done, some students had gone and put black tape on the faces of all black professors at Harvard. And so then that blew up.
Like pictures of the
Like all the black professors, they put
their pictures
crosses
up. Oh, okay.
on all their faces.
Really?
Yeah.
Where were their faces? Oh.
Like, because when you go the hallway of Kazakhstan, all the professors' pictures
are up
were
there.
and they put the black crosses on only the faces of the black professors. So that then got a lot of the groups that were sitting on the fence like
Jump in.
to jump in. So then that became a whole bigger movement of sit-ins, and students would sit in and occupy a space and say we're not leaving. And that grew and grew, and even the demands blew up, and the different groups that we had brought in and spoke to also mobilized. Then there was also the conservative groups as well that started mobilizing against us.
Exactly.
And a lot of the conversation now turned into, so we have the Harvard Law Record, which was like the newspaper for Harvard Law School. So we counter writing. So these people would write, and then we would also write.
Did you write some?
Oh yes, I wrote, I think 3 different articles.
Okay.
So it was a lot of writing. And that's one of the things I was saying about that space. It wasn't part of the legal culture here, that's where there was a huge moment of social issue that everybody was writing and people were reading, and people were counter articles and things like that. We did a lot of that during the period there. And yeah, it became a huge Occupy movement. So we forced the university, the administration then to set up a committee, which I was named to investigate the racial history of the school and recommend.
Okay.
And so the committee eventually recommended that the crest must go.
Did the crest go?
Yes. So now when you go to Harvard Law School, there's like a little memorial there acknowledging Royal Masfall's role. And it's even on the Harvard Law School's website about the group that we had formed.
Success.
Yeah.
Are you proud of that moment?
It's refreshing. It was refreshing. I mean, after I was in Brazil for spring break when the university finally announced the decision that the committee had taken. And I ended up in Brazil at the time where there were a lot of protests against the Lula government as well.
Which is back in power now. I guess.
Which is back in power
Just like
now.
the Mahama government.
Yes. But one of the things I found amazing then, I was reflecting on the protests there that I had been involved in and what was happening in Brazil at the time, and how I would see children at protests with their parents, everybody in the Brazilian colors, and it felt like a space people could take their children to. That's where some of the formative ideas about protest in Ghana as a tool, as a way in which, citizens can pierce into this impenetrable system.
Yeah.
Those ideas started forming from.
So the Harvard protest, from beginning to end, how long did it last?
The whole period must have taken, it felt like my whole time at Harvard I was protesting. By the time I was done, I was jaded. At the very least, 6 months.
That's a long time.
That's a very long time.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
it's a very long time. You know, a space was occupied. There were these writings. There were demands. There were town hall meetings. There's a lot.
Imagine if nothing had happened after that initial 25.
Yeah, that would have been it.
Yeah.
You know, that
Well,
would have
sometimes it's not even the numbers, man.
There's not even the numbers.
Yeah,
I mean, I keep saying that some of our most successful protests here in this country are also some of the least attended. One of the most attended protests that we had in Tamale, and people don't even know that we had the protest in Tamale. So
it's not really the numbers.
It's not often the numbers.
After Harvard, what next? Where did you go?
So you remember I went to Harvard purposely to do my PhD.
Yes.
But by the time I was done with all the activism and all of that, I was jaded a bit of the space. It was a tense time as well. America was going towards elections. The Trump factor was coming in and things like that. So yeah, when I got the offers whether to go to DC to work at the World Bank, I had 3 offers. I had one to go to a law firm in DC, one to go to the World Bank, and one to go to the International Court of Justice. And my partner, who I was dating at the time in Ghana, had gotten into Leiden University in the Netherlands. So I thought that, okay, maybe that's my cue to go to the Netherlands for the International Court of Justice. And so I left and I went there.
Did you get the master's already?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you went to the court.
And I went to the court and I worked at the court.
What was the most interesting case that you worked on?
I would say maybe Ukraine, Russia. Because that was when Crimea was in, how do you call it? Russia had invaded Crimea.
Yes.
And the Ukrainians then convinced themselves to bring the matter to the International Court of Justice. You know, and I was working on it at the time. Incidentally, the law firm in DC that given me the offer were the ones who were retained by Ukraine as counsel in that matter. So they came to the Hague to argue the matter. The partners saw me there. It's like, you're the level who turned our offer.
And
then they were very happy, excited to see me. They demanded we have, dinner. We had dinner after one of the cases in the court, and then they renewed the offer. So because Ukraine had then brought the case to them, I told them that even if I was joined, I would not be able to work on this case because I'm conflicted.
Exactly.
But that Ukraine had then decided to bring a lot of investor state arbitrations against them for all the Ukrainian businesses in Crimea against Russia. So there was a lot of investor arbitration that, I eventually left the court and joined the Covington and Berlin.
Okay. How long were you there?
I was there for a year. And then I went back to the UN headquarters.
Okay.
And incidentally, so this was during the first Trump years, and Covington was very liberal. I mean, when I joined, my supervisor was Eric Holder, who was Barack Obama's Attorney General at the time. So we're more Democrat-leaning, even though there were some Republicans there. But it's one of those typical DC firm was those firms where, it was a revolving door between government and private practice. So, a new administration comes, more people go into government. When a new government comes, they all resign, and then they now find law firms. So all of them will go into government and come out, go into government and come
Revolving
out.
door.
Yeah, So when Americans criticize that, Covington is definitely at the heart of one of those. Now it's struggling because Trump has withdrawn their security clearances because they were involved in the impeachment trials against Trump. Yeah, and so I went to the UN again. And I remember when I went to Harvard, I said I was going to do the PhD, right? And so it never left me, like that intellectual itch that I needed to scratch. So even as I was at the UN at some point, I was like, maybe I need to go back to school.
So you applied?
So I applied back to Cambridge and Sciences Po in France, and got an offer from them both, and then eventually decided to go to Cambridge and left for Cambridge. Yeah.
And so, is that when did you get into the consciousness of regular Ghanaians who don't know all this backstory?
Who don't know all this backstory?
Yes.
Listen, like by the time I had left, I had worked in the Ghanaian policy space for so long, but nobody knew me, right? That even once I was abroad, nobody kind of just knew who this kid was.
Policy guys are like that, always in the background, crafting stuff.
Yeah. And so it came in, but listen, by the time I was leaving Ghana, I was certain I didn't want to come back here. I was so
when you were going to Harvard?
Yes.
Okay.
I was so disillusioned by all that I saw, particularly even when I came in close proximity with the first Mahama administration and those who were there. Listen, I was a civil servant, so I could look at them, and it just felt like, the God factor in working, thinking that God is in some room and working, then pulling the curtain and realize that nobody is in charge. Like, like the sentiment and everybody, it just felt like everybody was looking for the next deal and something. It just didn't feel like nation oriented. And so I just said that this is no longer for me. So I was clear, and anybody who I would interact with abroad or Ghanaians that were thinking about what to do, I was like, listen, this Ghana thing you guys are talking about is just an imaginary line somewhere. The world is your oyster, move, whatever it is. But it's when something is coming from a place of hurt, you're not very healed, right? Like, so I was always kind of reflecting back on how what you can do. And you have been abroad, anywhere 2 or 3 Ghanaians meet, you're only complaining about Ghana.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of it. So when I was at Cambridge, and the whole Face the Country conversation was starting, it just kind of felt like, maybe the way forward to reform our politics, if more young people were interested in it, maybe that can be a moment, like a bulb through or whatever, a blow through the system, and so then become interested in. When I heard Face the Country, my first instinct was, who wants to organize a protest? Because now I've been introduced to the language of protest.
Yeah, and you have experience too, man.
Yeah. So that's kind of, and so I was away when we started mobilizing Face the Country protests and selling this idea, and most of the people who were doing this, none of them have been on a protest before, but I was like, we need a protest. We need to do this.
Is there a father or a mother of the Fix the Country protests?
It's very difficult to say, because when I heard Fix the Country trending on Twitter, my first thing, I was more on Facebook than on Twitter. I wrote, who wants to organize a protest, right? And so I started crowdsourcing people's names and started working on it.
Okay, you asked that question?
Yes.
On Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then I started, like, everybody who said, I'm in, I write your name down as an organizer.
What's the response?
Oh, yeah, there was a lot of people. We had a whole list of people who said yes.
You crowdsourced the thing.
Crowdsourced the protest, right? Then while I was doing this, a young guy who I didn't know who reached out to me like, oh, there's a group of individuals who were in some group thinking about what they should do with this fiscal country thing. And he's seen that I'm writing something about protest. Do I want to join the group? I said, sure. So I was put in a Telegram group. That's when I met Efia Odo, Kafui, and some of those boys who were also, like, they were like the beginnings of the, Twitter influencer age. And of course, they have not been politicized. They also seen this thing that Kafui had Twitter Face the Country blow up. So they weren't really thinking protest, but it kind of felt like, well, this is big. What do we do? So that one thing was like, listen, we need to organize a protest. And it has to be May 9th, I was saying. Because May 9th is, of course, when the supporters died in the stadium.
And we're actually recording this interview today on the anniversary, the 24th anniversary.
I didn't even realize that today is May 9th as well. 2025, yeah. And so the statement and the thing we sent to the police there, I was talking about May 9th being characteristic of the disregard for Ghanaian lives. And the number of people who are died, and the fact that it's not even something which is our national calendar. So it was like, that is the same kind of disregard for us that is reflecting on young people's perspective on the country who have lost faith in the country.
If you had waited 2 days later, you would have
been on
Kumi Preko
on May 11th. Yes.
Did you think about it?
So we did think about it. And some people had argued we'd do it on that day. But I had felt more strongly about May 9th because I felt that we need to create a new legacy, a new way of looking, and not fall into political
because Kumi Preko was part of
it. Like we shouldn't fall into that. Let's talk about why May 9th,
So we
wrote this thing on, I think, the 4th of May and sent it to the police. So we're on the 5-day mark.
Okay.
Because I started talking about this, because Face the Country started trending on April 28th.
Which year?
2021.
Okay.
I started talking about this thing April 29th, 1st May, when people then started reaching out. And when I went into the group, they were like, we don't know about the protest. Maybe not now. Let's do it in September or what. I was no, it has to be now.
You think they were scared?
Oh, I think so. None of them. It has to be now, and it has to be made now. So we first, and somebody went to deliver the letter to the police.
Did they agree?
And so, no. So when we sent it and put it up online, that's when traditional media then even caught up like, wait, there's some young people on Twitter saying that they want to organize a protest.
But then had you got your Twitter profile? You said you were mostly on Facebook.
I was mostly on Facebook. I had a Twitter account which I was not using.
So you used it.
So then I went back on Twitter.
Reactivate.
And then then they were looking for people to interview. And so people started reaching out, what is this about? And in a way, the government also lost its mind because it's just all of a sudden you wake up and it's like
some young people
on Twitter have mobilized themselves. They say the tweets have reached over 12 million retweets. Like, it just felt like, and so it's not surprising to me they started talking about terrorists have hijacked you. You people are operating with a coup d'etat mentality. That's when that messaging the state started pushing.
And all this while you were still in Cambridge.
All this while I was in Cambridge.
I mean, how were you feeling? It was like a godfather pulling strings or what?
I would wake up in the morning and I'll go from media interview from 8 a.m. to like 11. Because I would go on what's his name? Evans show on 9 p.m.
Joy.
Which ended like 10 this thing. Like, and I would not have a meal. Like, I was so pumped up, just adrenaline. You know, like, we need to do this, we're just talking about. And so that's kind of how people started getting.
That's why you entered our consciousness, yeah.
Yes. You know, and so the first thing people did was they went to try to look me up on profile. They said, Liz, look, he was senior policy and law at the presidency.
So he's an
NDC guy. So there's so much that people did not know anything about me and my whole time in Ghana that they had to start looking up. You know? So they didn't even know that I wasn't even a political appointee, that I was a civil servant throughout this process. You know what I mean? So that's how much people did not know who I was. And I think in many respects as well, the security services also, I wasn't on their radar. And all of a sudden, I'm organizing a protest in Ghana, you know? So yeah, when the National Security Minister reached out to me, it was not like,
Mr. Kandapa?
Yes, that I should fly down to Ghana, we can have a meeting at the safe house.
Safe house?
Oh yes, I'll play the audio for you because I recorded him. That's how much I wasn't certain of, you know, what
they saw you as a threat?
They didn't see me as a threat. I mean, even on the call, it's promised like we can promise you when you come, nothing will happen to you in Ghana. I can arrange the logistics for you to fly in. I said, no worry, I'll fly in myself.
You were not worried anything would happen to you?
You see this thing that one of the things I always wonder about, like in journalists who work in difficult places, and then, you know, like this, I've forgotten what her name was, walks in the front door, is shot at her front door, and people get killed. I always wonder, but just leave. But there's a way in which you can get sacked working on a belief and a principle, that your mind shuts out the risks, you know, and it's not the first thing you're thinking about. Or maybe you get so caught up in the principle of justice of it that you say that, you know what, whatever happens. But if you didn't have that shield, which is sort of like a chemical along your brain, you'll be, because the human body is engineered towards self-preservation.
Yeah, you don't want to go into
so that sense of self-preservation gets lost. And so now I reflect on a lot of those things and I know that, wow, if I wasn't driven in
by adrenaline and all that stuff,
I probably would be asking myself, wait a minute.
So, did you take the offer to come to Ghana?
I did. I flew into
that
Ghana.
Same year, 2021.
Yes, I flew into. I mean, we had a conversation. Let's say on Monday, like maybe on a Wednesday or Thursday, I was in Ghana.
This is before the protest.
This was before the protest.
Okay.
You know, and in fact, because they had gone for an injunction again in the protest, and we were contesting the injunction. So I came, met him. The application was before the Supreme Court.
Were you met at the airport by the government?
No, actually no. Okay. Came in, met up the next day with like a general in the Ghana Armed Forces. We drove to the safe house.
Ghana, it was that serious?
Oh yes.
Wow.
Oh yes. I met the general, the Minister for National Security, and the Finance Minister.
What was the atmosphere like? This is Ken Ofori-Atta.
Ken Ofori-Atta and Kandapa,
and the general.
And that, you know, the president had asked that they had a meeting with me on this.
What were they asking you?
Essentially to drop the protests, you know. And when I insisted, no, it must happen, because it's also a test of whether we're still a constitutional democracy. They were like, okay, this is going to happen over a dead body, you know. And it's like, but we have because there was an injunction against us where the Supreme Court. And it's like, well, we are testing our institutions, and whatever the case may be. So I left. I mean,
did you feel
threatened? By the time I left there,
did you feel threatened?
It was clear to me that I was going to be arrested if I persisted in this course. But like, it just become, because in fact, it was never to become a movement. It was just like, let's organize one protest and go somewhere.
So they kind of escalated.
And then they kind of escalated it. And the thing that, no, we are not going to allow it. Again, like the thing I was telling you about injustice is like, but how dare you? We have a right to do this.
Your secondary school instincts kicked
right, you know, like we have a right to do this. The more you are saying no, the more I am pumped up that no, we must do this. And we'll show you that we can do this.
Did your injections
so if you look at a lot of what Face the Country has been, a lot of it has been, the state made Face the Country what it is. But it's just like, because I guess ordinarily most people will be like, you know what, I'm not coming to kill myself. But my instinct was, you don't have the right to stop us and we're going to show up and do it. So the more they said no, the more we showed up. And so almost, I mean, apart from after years of fight, after months and months of fighting before we did the first protest, almost every other Face the Country protest we did then was illegal because they refused it and said, well, if you're still not going to go, we're going to jump up in the street. You can arrest us if you want to.
So that first injunction went through. So you didn't make your May 9th date.
So the May 9th, we couldn't make the May 9th. Then we were able to get to the Supreme Court, I think on June 8th, when the Supreme Court then quashed that injunction. Because there was an injunction in perpetuity.
What does that mean?
Meaning that the judge had given the injunction against us till the police said it was okay for us to go.
Of course, the police are not going to say
so it was like it had no end date, you know, and the Supreme Court quashed it. Immediately the Supreme Court quashed it, they went back to the High Court again for a new one.
And you were still in Ghana by then?
No, I had left.
You've gone back?
Yeah.
Okay. So you just came for that meeting and went?
I came for the meeting and left.
At whose cost?
At my own cost. So I just came in, left. There was no, like, it wasn't even publicized. In fact, we kept it hush-hush. There were about 4 people within Face the Country itself that knew that I had come for the meeting. Because I had discussed with them that this was the meeting, that was whatever it is. But the wider group, we didn't want the information because I gave my word at the time that we're not going to talk about it till after.
So you go back?
So I go back, and all this time we're still planning.
Okay.
I'm getting my friends who are showing up in the Supreme Court and arguing the case. I'm writing briefs. I'm doing all of that. We are training media communicators because the communication load was a lot. People were on different platforms. And then when we were sent back to the High Court, that's when Macho Kaka gets killed in Ejura. You know, and so we had heard the news of his attack. That apparently this Face the Country supporter who had been attacked in Nigeria, and we're going back and forth. We had sent people to Nigeria to go and verify the story and things like that. So the day we had announced that, okay, we're going to do a press conference about this incident that had been attacked, about a few minutes before we went on is when the family called that he had died at Kafui.
Wow.
So when you see, I still have a video because it was a virtual, it was still remnants of COVID, so Zooming had become a thing. The press conference we did was Zoom. And I tear up in that press conference. I still have that video. Because then it became real to me that I couldn't then believe that what we were doing, somebody had lost their lives out of it. And then after the military then gets deployed to Ejura, after the community then riles up, and more people are killed from it. You know?
How did that make you feel up in Cambridge?
Oh, there was a strong sense of responsibility.
Because people have died.
Because people have died. You know, and so even throughout, and that's why I took up the cause of Ejura, got compensation for victims. And even now, we are suing the government on this. I just received a letter again that I'd written to the Minister of Interior over some of those families. It became something that I've taken on and continue to ensure that, you know.
Do you feel responsible for those lives lost?
I do. I mean, I remember the weight of it. I remember, you know, Ifya Odo calling me, and for like an hour and 30 minutes, all she did was crying on the phone. And I just sat there and I was listening to her cry. You know, and you can't understand the emotional weight of it. It's brutal. So eventually, when some of these people said, I can't do this anymore, it's too much, I completely understood. And obviously, the immediate rationalization, oh, they have been bought off. But no, the weight of this thing was too much for us all to bear. You know, so yeah, it was one of the, you know, it's always felt like I owe something to these people who just believing in an ideal. You know, it's not like we sent and took people to go and attack anything, but it's just saying Face the Country, recording his community and say, you need to fix this country, that he lost his life, and the community demanding justice for his life. People then get killed because the state's response is always violence. The state's response, particularly to young people speaking up, is violence. And I always say that, like, even because the state didn't even know what to do with our rhetoric, because our rhetoric wasn't vote the MPP out, bring NDC, which is what they are used to. It is like the system needs to be fixed. There's something wrong about our politics. It seems anti-establishment. And the way in which they respond to anti-establishment mobilizing is to militarize the conversation around it. So, you know, you guys want to do a coup d'etat, these things, a terrorist thing that they started saying came from there. And in fact, when I eventually got arrested, people saying that I said I wanted to do a coup, people didn't understand the genesis that from when they started saying that, I started satirizing, like it was a satire for me, like mocking the state. Like every time we say coup. When this, so if you go through some of my old posts, every time I pass here, Mami coup 2 CD. Ratchet, like, it was just like, I didn't understand why the language of the state was deliberately pumping fear into the system and making people feel like what we were doing was not part of the normal democratic process of people speaking up and demanding different. That naturally, it means that we want to overthrow the government. Forget that we have no military connections, we had nothing. It just like became the scarecrow around which the state was, you know. So a lot of my activism has been in response to the state and how, you know, its reaction to just young people demanding, like, we just want to see a different country.
And after Ejura and all those killings, you're in the UK, you're trying to help. What happens next? How do you get slapped with a treason charge?
Yeah. So, I mean, remember, so before I came in, right? And as I told you, the first time I came to Ghana, before I left, the minister had made it clear to me that if I continued this, I was going to be arrested. So I knew I was going to come at some point, but I wasn't in the country. The weekend before I left, I came to Ghana, there was some Ghanaian student, Regina Mega, who had called me and said, there's somebody from the Ghana embassy who had called her to try to find out where I lived in the UK. And this was the weekend before I left. And it's like, she was very scared. So she just, you know, put the phone off and immediately called me. But I didn't tell her on the phone that as we were talking to you, I'm packing to go to Ghana. So I anticipated, you know, that was going to happen. And I mean, that was around the e-levy time where I said, and it's in the same spirit, and I said, I mean, now that this e-levy has been passed, then we might as well just do this coup ourselves. Right? So that's, and for me, like, it just became part of my rhetoric of mocking the state,
but you know,
and making fun of the state.
in the environment that we live, this West African environment, where you have Burkina and Guinea and Mali and Niger and these young coup makers, soldiers coming in.
You know what's interesting? I started enjoying it, and I'll tell you why. When Guinea happened, I wrote a post where I said I welcome the coup in Guinea, and the number of NPP members of parliament who were reaching out to me, I just like, okay, there's a hysteria.
Saying what?
Like, why are you writing that? You can't say this, you can't say that. I'm like, I welcome the coup in Guinea. And so when I saw them become agitated about it, I knew that I was poking them at a place where they were genuinely scared of. And I was like, all our protests, all the things we were saying, and it's just like they didn't seem to care. But they had a genuine fear about this. And so it became a point of mockery of the system for me that it seemed like this is the only thing you guys are afraid of.
So they'll give you
more. They'll give you more of it, you know? So it just became clear to me. And of course, the national security people who were following us, imagine when I came down to Ghana after the first one, we came to do the protest. When we did the August 4th protest, which, I mean, by all accounts, in Accra, which was the first phase of the country protest.
Why did you choose that date? That's the UGCC
Yes,
anniversary.
It was intentional, yes. It was intentional. Because again, remember...
You're choking them still.
Remember, we're trying to find... I'll tell you what, yes, symbolic dates. I'll tell you what.
That is very, very close to the GGCC and NPP, UP.
Yes. The first route for the protest we chose was the 28th February crossroads. And those were the routes we had mapped out. Later, Petit Pratt laughed at me that those were inaccessible. But listen, I'm a fanatic of history, and I'm trying to capture a sense of the independence struggle, and perhaps immersing people into that mind provoke something in them, you know? So it's always trying to have some historical link.
Symbolism.
That's why now, like, we do this Occupy Julobi House and things on the 21st of September, which is Nkrumah's birthday, trying to capture those symbolism of a time when the Ghanaian was proud to fight for his own. Those come from there.
For those who don't understand Julobi, what does it mean?
Oh, the Julobi means the son of a thief.
Who is the son and who is the thief?
No, for me, it's more, you know, it just so happened that, of course, it is the presidency, and so people immediately take it as we're referring to the president, but not necessarily. It was more a play on words on Jubilee.
And it's quite close to Jubilee, yeah.
Yes, because of the play on words on Jubilee, we started calling it Julobi. And it came from the fact that the presidency is at the center and perceived to be corrupt and things like that. So it's not really wanting to identify a person, but in fact to mock the seat of government.
Will that protest happen again this year?
Jolobi House. It's become a pilgrimage.
Okay, so
But that's what I'm saying. I had written something that now that the NDC is come, is it still Jubilee House or is it now Flagstaff House? So we need to start shopping the new name.
so that if it's Flagstaff, then you have to.
Graft Staff House. We're thinking of a new name for what it is.
So you're ready
But it
for
has
it.
to be something which, for me, we want to hold the space for a sense of a protest culture in Ghana,
Right.
where citizens can mobilize around something which is almost like a pilgrimage. You know,
What's your end game? Someone will be asking.
a better society, really. Like it's more communitarian in terms of what I want to see this country, the kind of conversations I want us to have and normalize in Ghana. It's more than anything.
How is your response to someone who says you just want to become president one day?
I heard it being said when we first started this, that surely we tell you this guy is going to be contesting in the 2024 election. They said all the time. This is just what those who said it beating their chests. Now they don't go back and apologize. They keep going with it. In fact, the funny thing about it is that I'm not even 40 as I'm sitting here. So I'm not even qualified to run for president.
When will you be 40 though?
I'll be 40, I think, in 2 years.
Okay.
And last year, for instance, when Alan Chamartin reached out to me to be his vice,
He did?
it was funny to me, yes. It was funny to me because I'm not even 40.
The vice have to be. You have to be at least.
You have to be at least 40. I mean, I didn't write him a nice letter. I tell him that's not my part. That's not the part I'm on.
Maybe you sound 50. Or you've packed enough experience into your life that it's almost more than the 40 that you're not even quite at.
Listen, when I started working at the Constitution Review Commission, I was 22, I think. And
you went to class 1 too early. You went to class 3 actually.
And I remember those days I used to tell colleagues I was 35, I was 22. And so I remember when I turned 35, I was like, oh, wow, I've been 35 for like
a very long time.
For a very, very long time. Because the society was a bit ageist.
Yeah.
And I was in a space where, because the Constitution Review Commission, I was meeting folks. And if they found out I was younger than my age, it would just create a different dynamic around me. So
what do you think makes people believe that you are that mature? What is it about you that makes people believe?
Today, I think perhaps it's the gray hair and the pot belly.
Back then, you didn't have a gray hair.
Back then, I didn't have it.
So
I don't know. Perhaps I spoke with the confidence of a person who ought to be older. You know, I suppose.
But you've gone through a lot in life. I mean, listening to your story.
Listen.
You packed a lot of lifetimes into one lifetime.
Yeah.
Treason.
Yeah.
Tell me.
So then I'm preparing to come down. And I was coming down because an embassy had invited me to speak on extrajudicial killing.
Which one?
There was a Danish embassy and there was the EU mission in Ghana. So as I'm flying in, I'm certain at this point that I was going to be arrested. And I was transiting through, Portugal. So I called Justice, a colleague friend who I'd known for a long time, was also at Harvard before me, now Deputy Attorney General.
Same side?
Yes.
Okay.
And said, so what are you picking up? He's like, he was also speaking to some folks. It's like, yeah, they're going to arrest you. What they don't know is whether they want to arrest you at the airport or they want to arrest you when you're done with your speech. Because if they arrest you before, then the embassies might be ticked off or whatever. And we were both saying, well, I hope I'm arrested at the airport. Because what I didn't want to happen was that I'll be on my merry way driving somewhere and some people would accost me and say robbery gone wrong or whatever it is. So my prayer was that I'll be arrested at the airport.
Did you get your prayer?
Well, I got my prayer. So when I landed,
prayer works, man.
when I was prepared for it. So my first instinct is, okay, I don't want my phone to fall into their hands. It has nothing on it, but I'd rather not. I don't want them to remember. They don't know much about me. In fact, when I was away, Raymond Atuguba called me. That the finance minister had called him. This is before even the meeting. That they wanted to understand me and what do I want. So they had found a way to connect that this guy had worked with Raymond Atuguba. So he's the first person they went to. So he called me and said that, okay, they're trying to understand what it is. And so he told them, listen, it's not your regular politics. This guy is a kind of serious guy, whatever it is. And so he kind of put them a bit on this thing about how to deal with me, Yeah, so I come in and I'm arrested there.
What does it feel like to be arrested?
And
what do you remember of the process?
In the beginning, it sounded silly and funny, because when I got in there and I gave my passport to the immigration officer, he then started pretending like, oh, I'm checking something, whatever it is, and then I just started laughing, And so I just took my phone out to call Justice and listen, it's happening. And then that's when they kind of lost their mind, got their phone.
They grabbed the phone from you.
Yeah. Moved me and things. But when I was coming, I had prepared.
No guns involved or anything?
Not at that point. The immigration was still at the airport. So I was taken into another room. Okay. So what's happening? Am I under arrest? No. Okay, I'm leaving. When you try to leave,
they stop you.
So apparently, the national security had asked them to stop me for them. I mean, they themselves, they can only deal with immigration law issues, But it's when the national security came in, that's when the assault started.
They hit you?
Oh my goodness!
Where?
Listen, where were they not looking to boot? And this was at the airport.
They were kicking you?
No, they were kicking me. I was on the first. They wanted to take my phone from me. And the funny thing was, I keep coming back to this phone thing. I'll talk a little bit about it. So because I didn't want them to know what, my communications, I bought a new phone the day before I flew out. Okay? And then my own phone, I put in my sock.
Inside your shoe?
Yes. So as even we were fighting over this phone, I said, where's your warrant, whatever it is. I knew there was nothing on it. Eventually they got it, but I got my fair share of beating. Then they took me out of there, bundled me into one of these V8 with a lot of military. There was one military guy holding a gun on this side, another on that side. And then they took me to the old side of the airport, which is the old VIP, the old terminal. And then went to keep me there. And that's where the next round of assault continued. So I arrived at 6 a.m. Eventually, we got to Ashaman, where they eventually took me at 11.
5 hours difference?
Yes.
6 to 5, 11.
Yeah, so that's how long I was there for. And because we are anticipating that I'll be arrested, there were 2 lawyers, Justice and another, who were waiting at the airport police station. That, when they bring in, airport is the closest police station, so they will bring him there. But no, so they also didn't have no information, nothing, we didn't go there and all. And after they had their share, and I mean, listen, I was resisting. I wasn't taking the blows down, to be honest.
You're fighting back?
Yes, I was fighting back. And then eventually they put me in the vehicle, handcuffed, then blindfolded, there's something over my head, and then put me into this vehicle and started driving out.
What's going through your mind when you are blindfolded and hooded and cuffed?
At this point, so, okay, I know we were in Accra, we were in the traffic, and I'm just thinking, because, I don't know where these people think they're taking me, that they feel they need to blindfold me.
Did you think they were going to kill you?
Not at this point. Because it just felt to me that they didn't want me to know where we are going. So, but when I started getting scared, is when we were driving non-stop. So I knew we had left Accra, and that probably we had hit the motorway because there was no traffic anymore stopping. That's when I started getting worried. And then I intentionally asked to pee. There's a pee on yourself.
Did you?
Oh no, it was a ploy as well because I also wanted to
get your bearings,
to get a bit of my bearings. So that's when I started, making things up in my head because now they've taken me off. As far as they are concerned, they don't know that I had been communicating with Justice and they were waiting for me. So all I kind of disappeared. You come in and nobody knows where you are, type of thing. And so they took me to Ashaman late in the night there, and then they brought me out. And
how did you know you were in Ashaman?
So when we came out and came into the station, I recognized that this was Ashaman. Took me to the commander's office. There in the night, they brought my bag. They said they had been instructed that I have a British passport. Where is the passport? I've never taken any nationality but the Ghanaian nationality.
So you have a Ghanaian passport?
I have only a Ghanaian passport. But they were insisting that there must be a British passport. So they started searching.
Were they afraid that they would be harming a British citizen?
I have no idea.
You had a British passport? I
don't know. But the intelligence they seem to have convinced themselves with was that. But I'd never traveled to Ghana with any other passport. So I don't know where that intelligence was coming from. And so then I was sent there and then stripped and then thrown into the cell.
Clothes off?
Yes.
Just your briefs?
Yes.
Okay.
And what they didn't know, of course, is that people were waiting for me. So by that evening, Justice and Co. had released a statement saying that I'd come into the country and had disappeared. So that's when, the news blew. And then the police only responded, I came to find out later, at around 2 a.m., acknowledging that I had been arrested.
2 a.m. the
Yes.
next day.
Yes. And in fact, telling people that I was being held at in Tema. So again, misdirected people to Tema.
By that time, you were in your cell.
I was in my cell.
Were
I
you
didn't even
alone?
know
Were you
that all
alone?
of the. Oh no, there were about 40 people in there.
40 people. How big is the cell? Let's say from this background.
Maybe it's from this background to where we are sitting.
40 people.
Because people are packed. People sleep. This is your head. The other person brings their feet. Their head comes here.
Like sardines.
You're packed in that way.
Do you stand? You all lie down, right?
No, you all lie down. They push, and when you lie, they push you, pack you. And there's some people who had like this thing that they had made out of sponge. They were hitting you, push, moving
To create space.
To create space. And then there was like because out of this, maybe like this space, the cell leaders had created a space for themselves where they won't be packed as sardine, which then further reduces the space that is left for everybody else.
For their comfort.
For their own comfort.
Relative comfort.
So when I came in there, they ask you, yes, if you want to have relative comfort, you have to pay 800 cedis to us, or they push you in there. I said, okay.
Did you have 800 on you?
I mean, I've been stripped down to my balls.
Wow.
To be in there.
How long were
But
you in that?
then one of the police officers, the commander came there and said, hey, stop worrying him or something. That's the kind of, but now there were a lot of like vehicles and the lights. You could see so now they started wondering, okay, who is this person?
guy?
And they kind of found out there was a lawyer. Now everybody now lined up to come and tell me their problems.
You became a
And
free counsel.
so like, I didn't even sleep throughout the night that first day.
What kind of cases were they bringing to you?
There's like one of, the main cell leader was a murder charge. He had been there for like 3 years. There was most of them were petty thefts. But the main thing was that they didn't have lawyers and they had just been in there forever.
What does that say about legal aid in Ghana?
Listen, oh my goodness. Eventually, when I get out, I end up representing about half of them. Most of them get out eventually. But yeah, on that day, all I just kept telling myself two things. The people who are in here are Ghanaians as well. They've survived it. I'll be fine. Kept saying that to myself. And then I decided that, okay, I've been preaching what I've been talking about. Why don't I test what we are doing and what the purpose of activism on these people? It's my job to explain our cause to them and see how it will resonate to them. By the next night is when they introduced the national security person into the cell.
National security guy?
Oh, yes.
As a prisoner?
Yes.
So undercover?
Yes. Now again, it sounds like a movie when I'm talking about this, but in fact, we sued the police and they responded and admitted. So it's on record in the courts where they have admitted that yes, they did plant the person.
So the guy was also stripped also.
So the guy was stripped there, was brought in. When I look at the demeanor of the person, I told the guys, I said,
this guy don't be.
Nah. No, they didn't. They went to ask him. He said, oh, it was a car dealer and the deal had broken down. He couldn't withdraw the money from them or whatever it is. They came back to me and I was like, oh, he's just a car dealer. I was like, nope. So a few minutes later, they brought the guy bread.
The national security guy?
So somebody said, oh, you're a visitor. They have brought you bread. So they gave it to the cell leader to then go and give him his bread in the corner there. So as he was taking the bread to him, those people, there's no private property.
No, you have to inspect.
So he wasn't even inspecting. He wasn't thinking to inspect. He just pressed down on it. It was like, what is this hard thing? So they went back. And I didn't even know, I hadn't seen this scene. Okay? Because I was lying that day. They had found a place for me to lie down. And then one of the boys was talking to me, Ibrahim. Ibrahim later gets killed recently. Ibrahim is talking to me, asking me questions about life and things like that. He was telling me about his girlfriend, and his girlfriend had written him a letter about how much he loved him, and he loved him till casket close, which was what the memoirs I've been working on is going to be by till casket close. And he was just fascinating to me. So I was there when I heard the boys shouting, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Then Ibrahim left and went to the court. So the cell leaders were like these Muslim boys who had found themselves, and they took over the cell. Because there was an old cell leader who they had deposed.
In a coup.
Yeah. And they had taken over the cell. So they were speaking among themselves. And Ibrahim then comes to tell me and said that they had found a phone and a knife in the bread.
In the bread.
National
security guy in bread.
Yes. So that's when they then realized that, okay. I remember the cell leader. Who did you say you were again? Because he couldn't understand the
things were happening after you.
Happening. So then later they had their whole thing, and eventually they called me in to kind of brief me about what was happening. And so one of them had decided that, you know what, use their phone. They decided that tomorrow they'll call their brother to come. So they'll give him the phone to go and sell for them and things.
Because you need
And
money.
I'm just thinking that, oh, these petty thieves. So just telling them that they're going to find this phone. Our best bet is to destroy this phone.
Yeah.
And so then eventually they weren't listening. They're still debating. Like,
Where was the knife though?
So the knife, listen, you don't ask questions. I saw the knife, but of course.
But that's dangerous. 40 people in one room.
They want to keep their thing. I mean, but for me, as long as we had it, we had it. And so it's the phone that I was interested in, because I don't even know whether it was back the conversation.
Yeah, conversation.
So I just kept telling them. So as we were there, I convinced them to bring a bowl of water. They put the phone in. And then the cell leader was there, and just thinking like, what do these people want to do to us? Like, he's been here for 3 years, the life is facing. So he just got angry, took the phone and started cracking it on the floor. So it just came from anger. So I just asked him that I wanted the SIM card and the SIM plate, which they agreed. So I was wearing, I call it long johns, I guess, because I was coming from a colder weather. I wasn't even in boxers, I was like in a warmer.
Yeah.
So I cut a part of it down there and I put the SIM
Inside.
and this thing inside, just to wait for when I had access to somebody outside to give that to them.
Where is the national security
So-
guy? Where all this happened?
So he has been added to the crowd there. And what the boys now decided, they had somebody on him. Like anytime he tried to raise his hands, they were beating him. Lie down. Throughout the night. And the other guys were sitting by me, fanning me, like they would have to protect me. So they were keeping vigil over me.
Wow.
While the guy
Was being dealt with.
that was being dealt with the whole. They beat this guy at like 3 a.m. So around 4 a.m., they come to extract the guy.
Next time.
So when this happened, so after that, they decided the guy must eat the bread.
Which had the knife and the
Yeah,
inside.
the guy must eat the bread. The guy is also refusing to eat the bread. So today our theory is that the bread was poisoned. No matter what the guy said, he won't eat the bread. They beat him how much? He said he won't eat the bread. Charlie. So after, what happens is that around 3 a.m., somebody comes to ask for the rubbish in the cell. So we've broken up the phone, which was put in the rubbish, because I told them. So they themselves came to carry their own thing away. So around 4 a.m., I was lying there when they came to pull the guy out. So they took him out and went to debrief and realized that no, the knife was in people's hands and people had made up the person.
And the phone is gone.
So 6 heavily armed guys then open up the cell. Everybody come out. This thing, they start beating people. And the cell leaders, they take them out. So we're down when we're hearing them crying from the top. Eventually they came, they went to look for the rubbish to confirm where the things were and all of that. And this was like just the night before I went to court. I was taken to court the Friday. So people saw me come out of the cell when I was being taken to court, chanting "Arise, Ghana Youth." I know what had happened throughout the night, but
It's like a full movie, man.
I'm telling you. And in fact, remember what I said. So these kids then become bonded to me. Because once I was there, people were bringing food. And I had declared hunger strike. So a lot of them were not being fed. I mean, nobody feeds you in police cells. Several of them have been there forever. So it was like cocoa season for them. Food was just coming. They were eating. When they were coming to take me out of the cell, the whole cell just jumps into "Arise, Ghana Youth for your country." They start pushing the police back. They're not going to allow them to take me. It was like a whole scene. Listen, by the time we went to court and came back, they said I had radicalized the cell, so they moved everybody out and spread them across police stations across Tema. So yeah, so it just happened that from then till I was eventually released, I was the only person in the cell.
One man in the whole.
Because they were afraid what would happen
Others.
if others were allowed to.
What was court like? What was the court session like?
I mean, the court session is when I went there for the first time. And at this point, I didn't know they were going to charge me with treason. Because what they were talking about was a misdemeanor of something to causing breach of peace or whatever it is. It was there in that morning that they swapped the charges to treason. So we went before the district court judge. She said she didn't have jurisdiction. And so she was reminding me. I was just thinking to myself, I mean, even in law, it doesn't make sense. If you have no jurisdiction over a person, if you don't have a power to release, you don't have a power to commit. You know? And so I didn't say anything. I mean, I just came out, and a lot of people then, Face the Country had mobilized so many people. People took buses from Kumasi or Boase, all places, to come that day. So there was a long crowd, and I was just gingering up the crowd.
Who was defending you?
Akoton Pao, Professor Raymond Atuguba, Justice Remsai.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those were your lawyers.
Those were
Okay.
those were the frontline lawyers, but then of course several of my mates who also volunteered.
Okay. So they charged you with treason.
They charged me with treason.
You plead what?
That day, do I even get to plead? I don't even get to plead because the court says I have no jurisdiction. So there's no plea that is taken.
But they charged you.
First day. Yeah, no plea is taken. So, but this is what I told myself. You see, treason is a political charge. It's more politics than law because it's about the state
Trying to over
through the state, right? So I'm saying that, okay, this is a political trial, and so I was going to give them a run for their money. So I made sure that anytime I came out, the symbolism and the things I was doing and the songs I was singing and how I was chanting the crowd would put fear into them. And in fact, Nyawota Maklo gave an interview later on that I came to see where he was talking about the symbolism and the things that they were doing. He was certain that a coup was going to happen. Because he was just reminded of the things that had moved the other ranks during Jerry's trial. And he was seeing that. And I was being purposeful as well because I want them to be afraid. Remember what I had come to understand they were most afraid of and what they're charging me that I wanted to do a coup. I just knew that, okay, all the cameras were trained on me during this moment. I'm not going to have more than 15 minutes. I have to make it count. And that's what I kept telling myself. No matter how I was feeling mentally, literally, anytime I was coming out of the van, I would whisper to my own self, showtime. Because it was about showing strength to the regime. You know, and at some point, now they were sending people to come to the cell, but why won't you apply for bail and just leave? So that's what you would want. You arrested me, release me. Because that's how they became now, you know, worried about, you know, the optics and what I was doing.
And you were still in Ashaiman?
I was still in
Same place?
I was still in the
How
same
long were
cell.
you there?
And in total, for the first time I was arrested, I think I spent 32 days or 35 days.
How did you get out?
So what we had decided to do, Justice and I, was that when I went in there, a lot of the people, like what had happened to me, the police would charge you, and it was rampant in our criminal justice system. They'll charge you before a court that has no jurisdiction, take you to court, the court says I can't bail you, and they'll keep doing this for 6 months, a year, and the case is not going anywhere. And they keep going before the same judge.
Why can't they be held in check? Why can't they be stopped, prevented from doing this?
So this is what I told Justice that, listen, I am in this situation, it's unpleasant, but I'm an activist first. And so let's use this opportunity to challenge this all the way to the Supreme Court. And that's what we eventually did. So we get to the Supreme Court, it gets to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says that, but why won't you just apply for bail for him to leave? Missing the opportunity to address
The issue.
The issue of why people were being kept in this situation. And in fact, it was like, yeah, you guys are doing an academic exercise. You know, in fact, they wanted to go ahead and grant bail there and then in the Supreme Court, which would have been the first time the Supreme Court had granted bail to anybody. And the Attorney General intervened that, oh, they're not going to oppose my bail, we should go and apply for bail, and that they will make sure that, you know, and she made the Deputy Attorney General, you know, we don't want to set a precedent where the Supreme Court gives bail and whatever. So then it's when I said to them, okay, go ahead and file a bail application. And when they filed the bail application, they who had gone to the Supreme Court and said they were not going to oppose bail decided to oppose the bail. And this I found out later, of course, the former Inspector General of Police goes to see the now Court of Appeal Judge, Jankama, because they had assumed that the file was going to go to him.
Is this IGP Dampare?
Yes. To prevent me from getting bail. And so this matter goes before Domahine instead. And in fact, Domahine eventually grants me bail. But he was then, this process that the Chief Justice is going through, that for giving me bail, they came for him, that he went through a disciplinary process to try to remove him from the badge. It was in fact defended by Nana Atudadzi. I didn't know this to Nana Atudadzi the day I was going to Parliament. Then disclosed to me that, you know, for giving you bail, they brought charges against
the judge.
Against the judge. You know. So they are kind of convinced themselves if I could be committed to say maybe in Sawam, eventually people will talk, people move on. And maybe that was the hope. You know. And so when I came out, I kind of told myself that the only reason why they were doing this is that our advocacy and activism was making them uncomfortable. So it means we need to do more.
More fire.
More fire. And so that's what I decided to commit my life to then, that, okay, this is what you were displeased about and you took this steps.
I'll do it more.
Then I'll do more. And so I feel like activism then even took a different thing after I got arrested.
And then you get arrested again the second time.
Yeah.
Which year?
I mean, in fact, I got arrested almost immediately after I came out because I was supposed to go to court. The first time I was going to court myself is when police trailing me, arrest me somewhere and said, they have arrested me. Failure to observe road marking.
Where was the road marking?
There was no road marking on the road. I mean, how many of our roads have road marking? In fact, I should even, because the district court will make the registrar go and do what we call locus unco to go and verify the place. Yeah. There's no road.
Where was it? Which part of
so that was the second time.
Where was this arrest?
This was around East Legon, coming towards the traffic light under the underbridge that they have reconstructed. Yeah. Before it was like you have to be in a lot of gravel. Yeah.
Failure to observe road marking.
Failure to observe road marking.
And they take you to where?
Oh, they took me, arrested me, put me in cell over the road traffic. Took me immediately straight to what's the name? Medina District Court for me to be remanded. So it was after this happens that the British High Commissioner then tweets that we see that Oliver has been arrested again. We want to see where that goes. Okay. So that's when, Dampare then releases the whole statement about
why should they get involved in our matters. I remember that as well.
And things like that. But yeah, that's kind of, that was the second time. And for some reason after that,
did you go to
it
court
had
for
a desired effect.
Okay. Did you go to court for that?
Oh, I did go to court.
And what was
severally
the outcome?
Out of that.
Outcome.
That's where the judge went to this. In fact, that matter is stuck. It was stuck in the Court of Appeal because we challenged the judge that dismissed this matter. She refused to, so we challenged it. So it was that. So I think these cases have now all been discontinued
by the new administration.
So
third time we were arrested.
The third time was arrested was Occupy Julobi.
What was the charge?
So we show up the first day.
Protest in front of Jubilee House.
We didn't even get. I had just arrived in the morning. I was holding some books. We said we were going to do teaching about the Constitution and things to people, pamphlets, and then that's where they brought the bus and bundled us into the bus. So we didn't even set out to do the first day. The protest didn't happen. So we were just arrested, and then it kind of blew up. The Thomas Nadi, the BBC journalist, was also picked up, which the police were denying till they'd forgotten that he had given
an intro.
It was recorded while he was in the back
of
the police van while it was going. So the BBC also released the images, which I think they were a bit embarrassed about.
Is this where your key adventure took place?
No. This is the recent arrest. So then by 11 p.m. we were arrested. We were released from custody, and we said we'll show up again the next day. At that point, they couldn't go ahead and arrest us, and so we did the next 2 days of the Occupy Julobi protest. So the first day didn't happen, but the second days, and then of course the last arrest was the Stop Galamsey, which was on the anniversary of Occupy Julobi house protest. Yeah.
When did you take the key out of the police car?
Oh, so you see, that's what is interesting about that protest as well is that, the police, like they would always do for a protest, go for an injunction to stop the protest. And so we purposefully set out that protest that, listen, we want to challenge, we want to bring attention to the frequency with which the judges were giving them injunctions. Because even after Occupy Julobi, we had tried several protests, some of them which I am arguing to the Court of Appeal now. Like the Christmas protest, we wanted to go, the judge ruled that Christmas is for merrymaking,
not for protesting.
So which made our democracy the only one where protest is banned in December. So that matter is still in court, so we decided that, listen, this is becoming one too many. We have to get arrested to make the point that...
Oh, so you are seeking to be arrested?
We know we're going to be arrested because the police had issued a statement, we're not going to allow whatever it is. Then when we did that, eventually, the first day they didn't know what to do because they had been embarrassed from the first Occupy Julobi house. So we decided that we were going to stay in the space. But then we saw, in terms of their releases, the starting of the crafting of the narrative. Oh, these people are being violent in the space, whatever it is. Then we will take a video and we say like, we are playing football. Where is the violence?
What was this protest branded as?
This was the Stop
Galamsey
protest.
Yes, just before the election.
Just before the election in September again. So as they were putting out this statements, we would also be mindful.
We saw the football game.
We also be putting this out. I'm terrible at it, but I made sure to play.
Kick the ball at least.
So then second day before we went, they had released a statement like 3 a.m. where they said that essentially suggesting that they were going to clear the space, which means they were going to arrest. So when I woke up around 5, when I saw the message, the first thing I did was to call the police. I got the police regional command lawyer, and said that, listen, we need to because you just told this statement. We don't understand. We need to sit down and dialogue. We can reach out and said, okay, let me talk to my boss. I speak to the regional commander, Ahin. He's like, we've been ordered not to engage anymore. That's it. So we were going out knowing that the police had decided that they were not going to talk. They were going to arrest. So when we get there, by the time people get there, they now start using these things to push. So we had brought the van with the water and food under the trees. We were there. And then all of a sudden, I saw the police form a human wall around the truck. So I thought that they thought that we were going to move the truck onto the street or something.
Around their truck?
No, our truck.
Your truck? Which had the water and the food?
Yes. So I thought that they were thinking we're going to try to breach them and try to move the truck. So I started laughing. So I just told the driver that, you know what, I see your laptop in there. Just come and lock it up and take it and go. Unknown to us, the coming around it was to bring in the towing van to come and tow the truck. So when the truck first comes, there's a number of us that is trying to prevent the truck from towing the vehicle. Because like, but what is it doing? Why are you trying to do this? And then we are on it, and the tow truck then goes under us to try to hook the thing. So I then jump off. Then I started looking around the vehicle, like, how can we demobilize this thing? So I'm going around, and I say, wait, there's nobody even in the car.
Police
and the thing is running. Okay, I'll take off the key. So as I'm moving, incidentally, like, because I was on the media was following me. So as I'm moving and walking around and looking around the car, what should we do? All these times, there was another gentleman who was with me, who I wanted, and so by the time I take the key out, my destiny was that I seen where the transformer thing was around the 37, that would throw the key inside it, and that it might take them a while to
go and find the key.
To be able to find the key to come and open this and be able to retrieve it. By which reason would have stopped them from towing the vehicle.
This is your mischief playing.
So this is
a role here.
we're just thinking of, okay, you're trying to take away our trap with no reason. I need to demobilize
your car.
Yeah, at the time I was just thinking, can you lose a tie? Like I don't know
to stop them.
Yeah, something. What can you do to stop them? Because I think we're being fanciful in thinking. You know how, like an environmentalist, they're trying to cut down a tree, you change yourself to the tree. That's kind of what we were doing, but trying to prevent the. Oh, they didn't mind us. Like, it was a human life worthy of any of this thing. Yeah.
So you grab the key.
I grabbed and throw it into the thing.
You threw it
into the transformer. This thing's there. Yeah.
Did they ever find it?
Oh, it didn't take them long.
They found it.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I should have kept the key. It didn't take them.
Were you charged for that?
So I eventually, after that happens, then I hear one of the police commanders command the people, arrest him. So as I'm standing there, the junior officers were just looking at me like they didn't know what to go in, and that he was shouting on them to arrest, but they were still not moving. So I didn't mind them. I went to stand somewhere. Later on, I was given an interview standing there. Then I saw them trying to form
a wall
around me, and then I moved back. And then at the same time, one of our guys then comes in with a motorbike, which I jump on the back of the motorbike.
You evaded them?
Oh yes, and I left. And then they started arresting individuals and things like that. I went on to a number of television studios and did interviews and things. And then we started, because we were anticipating arrests at the protest, we started, okay, our media guys and those who are going to in charge of comms, you're not at the protest ground.
So you can talk.
You can do this, So we started then moving people out. Some folks even moved out of Accra and things, just so that we can know how we can keep the messaging going in case, core people were picked up.
So some people were arrested?
Oh, a lot of people were arrested.
And detained.
I mean, of course, they know some of the Face the Country leadership as well. So even those who were not at the protest, they were looking for them. They went to arrest some people even at a nightclub.
Who had nothing to do with.
Oh yes. They really went out to try to uproot what all of this.
And all that was only resolved with the new government coming in?
Yes, all that was only resolved with the new government coming in.
How does that make you feel?
Several times, even during the, when I was being prosecuted for treason, right? I would hear people call on the then Attorney General, go and file a no prosecution. This is embarrassing. Doesn't mean anything. And I always insisted, I wanted, I just want my day in court. For 3 years, they won't show up. And you have to be going every day. One day I won't show up. They're asking the judge for how do you call it? An arrest warrant, bench warrant. So the intent was not to move ahead with it. We never had one day of trial the whole 3 years. Not a single day of trial.
How does that reflect on the Ghanaian justice system?
Oh, I mean, you see, it's strange to me, and I always say this, that for this to happen and for this to go on and for a judge to be complicit, listen, I don't know how many applications we didn't bring to try to get this thing struck out. It was just like, the system's mind was made up. There's everything we tried. So for me, I can literally see the stranglehold the executive power can have over the judiciary. And I tell people to be very cautious, because people will assume necessarily that it's only people of a particular political leaning. But our judges are very subservient to power. Because one, power determines their promotion, power determines so many things around them, that there's almost an ingrained cultural instinct to serve power.
Do you think all that happened back then can happen with this new administration?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All of that can happen. In fact, we are going to progressively see courts realigning, because they know there's a new sheriff in town. So you may think that we may see a lot of obstructionism. I tell you, I don't necessarily think so. I think that on the lower structures up, they'll start again, people looking for favors, people doing this and things like that. It's always going to be there.
What do you think of this suspension of the Chief Justice? And is that a reflection of what you think can happen with the rejigging of the judicial system?
A lot of the times when I've talked about, because I'm a big advocate of oral and the need for, people to be held accountable for some of the excesses.
Operation Recover All Loot.
Yeah. And I hear people say all the time, yeah, but we are trying to reset the judiciary fair. And that's why the Chief Justice, I'm like, what are you talking about? If you think that this machinery of created starts and ends at the Chief Justice, you have very little understanding of what it needs to clean up the judicial system. And to be honest, incidentally, when I was at Constitution Review Commission, we had a research team of 6. I was in charge of a judiciary brief. So the question of judicial independence and things like that, I've reflected on it. Like, I can't understand why, like, when I think about myself as a judge, I don't know what would motivate me to want to rule in the way of the executive, because I'm anti-authority in the first place. So I don't understand, like, in terms of all the money we provide you people have police officers walking about with you. I don't know what you're afraid of, but I think there's a general disposition of timidity that pervades, Ghanaian institutions, right? Like, for instance, that the Minerals Commission would now recently issue a statement that Konta Mining for the past 3 years never had any license that was ratified by Parliament. They didn't have any EPA. You're saying that now.
When they're in charge?
You're saying that now. What does that mean for us?
They're afraid of political...
So those institutions that you are supposed to be the safeguard of us against, politicians, you lose your voices, because everybody is protective of my pension, my this, my that. I've seen that happen in the civil service, where everybody is just like, these people, if you want to keep your job, let them do their thing.
I have 3 years to retirement. Leave me
alone.
That kind of thing.
It's just like, and those who have spoken up have seen their head chopped off, right? They've been bent, that you become a cautionary tale to the next person. So if you think that our institutions are going to do something, all they know is that they're going to be victimized, they're going to lose career, and nobody's principle is that I'm happy to sit home.
What needs to change for our institutions to act better?
I think that we have to change in many respects.
So it's a human thing.
I think it's a very human thing, because a lot of the times, people are always doing this calculation between going to say something in my job. I'd rather keep the job. That disposition builds up across. Okay? So for institutionally we to be changed, it's a psyche thing in our disposition to power and our tolerance for some of the things that see there. If we see it as so objectionable, it won't happen. Right? Like, I always reflect on the fact that when I came out of a Sherman, and I was talking about how the state doesn't feed its inmates, the police service released a statement and said that I'm a liar and I'm an attention seeker, their words. And I'm thinking to myself, what makes an institution of the state release a statement to lie? Like, why? There's a sense of professionalism that undergirds institutions across the world that they would not do that. The politicians can do whatever they want, but the institutions can count on them to trust their word. So I honestly don't know.
Are you frustrated by that?
It is frustrating. It is because I don't know how we can reform the system without the people. Like 1-2 individuals cannot be at the forefront of a new Ghana on the call for a different republic. It has to be at every level, every micro decision level, persons who say that, okay, if you take this decision, I find it so objectionable that I'll tender in my resignation. Like when Nixon was impeached, it was prosecutor after prosecutor come in, he command and refuse and tender resignation. He kept doing over and over again. So that backbone that people respect, not in our case. Like there's always the shut up. So even now when I speak, people like you have done that, the other government left. Instead of keeping quiet and chopping, you're still talking. You're not, and I am portrayed as the one who's not the wise one, who doesn't learn to benefit. Because to benefit then it seems as what the society values. And it's very strange. It really is strange.
What is the cost to you of the activism that you have taken part in over these years?
Listen, beyond the constant paranoia and fear that somebody was going to do something to me. Listen, I went from absolute obscurity to walking into any space and being recognized. And particularly in the early times when this transitioning was happening, these are people who have built a certain relationship with me in their head online. I don't know them. I haven't interacted with them. But they are interacting with me from a place of familiarity. And I can't tell the distinction between those who are for or against what I'm doing. And so a person might approach me in a way and my guard is up. I'm worried because I don't know.
So your antenna is always up.
Yeah, I don't know what is going to happen. And it's a huge burden to carry. Not being able to, walk freely. In many respects. But beyond that, I mean, of course, there's the intention to derail my PhD in Cambridge. That's why my passport was seized from me. I can't travel out of the country. Even when consistently I've showed up in court, release my passport. My partner doesn't live in Ghana. She works in Geneva. I can't travel to see them. It's just like, even if you go to court, no. But every time I'm showing up in court. Mm-hmm. So you're not being allowed to be able to get access to your passport and leave. These are things that were happening. Then, of course, in all of this, I decided that, you know what? I'm not going anywhere. I wasn't planning to live a life in Ghana. Okay, I'm going to build up a firm. This becomes the result of this thing. And it is a space where I came to realize, okay, people actually are not worried about political exposure. They just want part of the rot. And so for which reason, myself and say Gabi Ochedakun are both politically exposed now. But big businesses will go to him because you have influence. You can then get them to pay my money for me, or you can get this access. So it's not like we want somebody who is not involved in the political conversation. We just wanted to use it to secure an advantage. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, of course, there's businesses that must constantly question themselves that your professional life and your public life,
can they give you work?
Can they give you work? I don't want to give you work. They'll come after me. Hey, I like what you're doing, but no, I don't want. So you're seeing that at every micro level. Whether I work into any institution and things like that, it's like, wow, we like what you're doing, but no, I don't want to take a picture around me, or something will happen to me, things like that. It's just like the experience of our democracy is constantly living in fear.
Has it improved with the transition to the new?
No, I mean, I've seen that change, and that scares me even more, right? Because there's these people who have convinced themselves that, well, from time to time he bashes us, but we're more to gain from his advocacy than not. Some who have convinced themselves that because of my opposition to what I was seeing during the former regime, that naturally I must be aligned to them. And when I am not, when I'm just being myself,
they're surprised.
Yeah, they're surprised, right? And of course, there's a whole political divide that believes that I caused them to lose the election.
People believe that you were the
absolutely
of their loss.
Of the loss of their election.
Really?
And it's strange to me how that when I look back at the number of protests we have organized, the last Occupy Jolobi one is like, yeah, that definitely is the one that caused us to lose the election or things like that. And I'm just like, of course, I mean, the advocacy started from, we deserve better as Ghanaians. Different things have to happen. But at some point, it became, I just looking at the brazen, because I always used to say that I'm desensitized in many ways to corruption because they're both doing this so much that it becomes very difficult to even fake the moral outrage around it. But I felt that there were certain things which was like the arrest of dissenting voices, journalists and things. It felt like it was touching at the foundations of our democracy. That is what kind of motivated me the most. That belief that no, we won't allow you to protest. Those are like constitutional guarantees of the system, which I felt like even if we were being kept hungry by this political class, at least the Ghanaian could speak.
Yeah.
And so those were the things that I became motivated by. And I'm saying that, I'm always going to be on guard about state power. Our experience of executive power is one of abuse. And our political
no matter
class,
no
matter who is in power. And that abuse, we can't take our eyes off the ball in being vigilant against this, And so, the fair share of attack, I receive it, This is like a couple of days ago, I've been attacked because I'm saying that, I know that I have been a big supporter of Oral. You have arrested the former signal boss,
Yes,
Eduboahin. But he said that he's paid money to political parties, which is unconstitutional because that's a campaign donation. We have to interrogate that issue, right? Well, we don't want to sweep it under the carpet because he said it could potentially be the NDC. You guys don't want to hear it, but we have to have that conversation.
Who else may he have given money to?
Yeah,
those are the other questions.
Yeah. Absolutely. So for me, that's we can't, because I'm interested in the health of the republic. You are interested in whether or not your political party will catch a scandal. I'm not motivated by that.
A couple of quick questions before we close this out. What's the status of your PhD?
I didn't fund my funding was I lost my funding because money is limited in these institutions.
Wow.
Well, you're not available; they have to move the funding on. So I'm trying to find.
How does it make you feel?
Oh, it's equitable from the university's point of view to issue to somebody who was able to at the time. But I knew that this was the purpose of the regime then to do exactly this. And at some point, part of me have come to accept this as the cost of doing business.
Will you still do your PhD one day?
It was, you see, the PhD was not a professional thing for me. It wasn't to gain any professional advantage. I was working at the office of the legal counsel to the UN. I was the only Ghanaian there. And so professionally, I was fine. I felt like I was on a trajectory. I didn't need a PhD. Nobody requires a PhD of you.
It's just for
the
yourself.
UN. It's just like my own
wish.
Like that child who never left reading.
Yeah.
Wanted to do something intellectual for myself.
So you also do one day?
So I definitely want to do.
Can you fly now? Is your passport back?
Now I can fly, yes.
Previously you couldn't fly?
No.
Till when? When could you start flying?
Oh, when the government left, I went to Thailand.
Is it nice?
Oh yes, I loved it. I love my trip.
Couple of quick questions. I've been checking out your Facebook, very active. There's one post where you say, "Why always me? Why never you?" What's that about? And who is the you?
You know what's funny? It came from, this was after I'd gone to Parliament. Parliament had called me. Because this year I had told my partner that, listen, we're going to continue to do this activism. And I was going to try not to get arrested. That was my one promise to her. And I had then gone to Geneva and come back. I was organizing this conversation around the new constitution for a new generation. And then all of a sudden, I'm hearing people are calling my phone and blasting my phone. Yeah, your name has been mentioned during appointment committee. What? I'm like, what is all this?
Oh yeah, you visited them some time ago.
Yeah, what is all this? Like, I don't understand what the hula baloo was. And I saw people, you see, they'll show him this and that.
What took you there? How come you ended
Because I talked about the fact that members of the appointment committee were demanding money from appointees to approve them. Okay? This is not information that was hearsay. This is information that I witnessed an appointee talking about. And more than one appointee. And monies that were being demanded to become the culture and whatever it is. And things. And I just kind of wrote a post like, this country. Like, why would you even do this? Now they're faking some outrage. Like, why are you talking about? Let's take your money. Come and prove. And just looking at this, nothing disappointed me more than the Ghanaian on the outside. Right? Like, throughout all my policy years, I've worked on at least 50 laws in this country. There's not a single law that has passed through our parliament without parliamentarians being bribed. There's not a single law. So when the NSB director talks about 980,000 to give to the parliamentary committee. Not somebody says, this is way before I became an activist. I saw these things happening and I kept questioning the system. It doesn't make any sense.
Every single law is greased with cash.
Every single law. When we can choose to call it, we are facilitating what? People who are paid to do this job. So, and I know that this thing has happened. And I'm talking about it, and people, Ghanaians are jumping on the street like, yeah, go and bring you. That day, I looked at it. I sat there, the statement I wrote, they didn't want me to finish reading the statement. It was like 11-page statement. That's how I was tired. I was like, I wanted them to do their worst. Because it just the hypocrisy of the system, it's just so frustrating. And so when I came out of it, I was like, listen, it doesn't always have to be me talking about these things. Like when you hear these things, when nominees appear before Parliament and says that when we, the members of the committee, when we finished, they gave us state lands to thank us.
Yeah.
How does that ring to you?
That was crazy.
When somebody says, when we were distributing recruitments into the army, you gave me some, you didn't give me some. How does these things ring to you? When you hear them, why don't you say that, okay, on my own, I'm going to take this on and then push for information on it and do this? Like there are little ways in which we can, So that's where that came from. Just the frustration.
Why always me? Why not you?
Why not you?
Okay, you say some people only want to make small changes to the constitution. What big changes do you think Ghana really needs?
One of the things that I'm still thinking about a lot was Professor Akila Pasoya asked me a question about the constitution review process that is going on. And he says to me that, okay, we have gone to do some changes in there. How do we prevent another Barker-Vormawor or Gregory Afoko from happening again? And I've been reflecting on that question alone. That sometimes when I hear some of the ideas on the table, we should, the Attorney General is also Minister for Justice, we should decouple it. The idea seemed like we're going to do some cosmetic changes. But I feel like our society is in crisis. Like the Ghana project, this is not where we are supposed to be. So if there's such a failure and we have this moment, we must immediately ask ourselves, how can we social engineer a society we want by rewriting the rules of the game? So that's the question I keep asking myself. What is this? This is a real constitutional moment we have. What do we want to do with it?
What are the best practices? Who has done this around?
So I'll give an example. Like when we were talking about, we went to a constitution review, and that is important. And then we said, okay, we're going to go into the streets and collect 1 million signatures of Ghanaians in support of constitutional reform. Mm-hmm. The first question is that, but what are you going to use the signatures for? You can't change a constitution like that. Listen, I was part of the Constitution Review Commission. I know. It's not about the legal. Okay? But we must ask something. We must think carefully about the fact that the president, the executive appoints less than 8,000 people in this country. If 1 million Ghanaians can sign a document calling for constitutional reform and they can ignore us, is this a democracy? So, first of all, the constitution must allow what we call a popular initiative where people can demand for change of the constitution. It shouldn't be the president's prerogative to change the law that is ours to change. Secondly, think about one of the things we have proposed down to the Constitution Review Commission is the right of recall, which exists in many places, where once you have voted in a member of parliament, we have a right to gather signatures and recall the person.
It's like I'm sending an email.
Yes, I'm sending an email. So our tweaking of the constitution, a lot of the ideas we are thinking about is, okay, one of the things we know that the 1992 constitution bet on was that institutions will safeguard the democracy. Politicians then figured that it is easy to pack these places with political appointees, and so quickly you have co-opted our institutions of state. So we must be able to create avenues within the constitutional framework where the people directly can take action. Example, there's something called private prosecution. If the Attorney General is not prosecuting a person, citizens can mobilize, get a lawyer, and prosecute a crime. It happens in other jurisdictions. Okay. So multiple ways in which we can get around institutional blockage is one of the ways in which the Constitution must think about what are the biggest ways in which the Constitution is not being implemented and how do we get around. So it calls for re-engineering of the constitutional framework. And don't sit down and come and make cosmetic changes.
Will it require systems thinking?
It must require systems thinking. You must think carefully. A lot of times people ask me, so what article do you want to change? But I'm saying that, no, if you go from an article framework, you have lost it. We must ask for ourselves, what executive do we want? And we must refashion an executive that we want. So in America, for instance, they said that they have a constitution of limited government, which means that you can actually enumerate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the powers that we have given to the federal government. And that anything they do outside this
It's beyond.
is beyond. In Ghana, it's like
Unlimited.
this unlimited
Explain systems thinking to my 15-year-old son.
Okay. So you have to be able to understand that any step you take has a cause and effect on everything.
Okay.
So whenever you are asked as a policy person to say, okay, why don't we grant paternity leave? What is this is just, or why don't we increase maternity leave? Immediately you have to think of businesses. Okay, the state for the state is not a problem, but in terms of private businesses, would they incentivize them or make them less interested in recruiting women? Okay, what if it makes them less interested in recruiting women? What measures can the state then to cushion that? So there's always have to be a back channel. The failure of that, for instance, is where the government says, we are pumping this money into ACE, and then we turn around and we tax condoms. Right? Like, so 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Okay. That's kind of...
So thinking through the...
It always have to be always 360. Okay. That's kind of...
You posted, maybe just die. That's quite a very violent post. Who are you asking?
No, I'm talking about the obstructionists in Ghanaian society. Okay. That those who, when anybody wants to take an action, wants to do something for the republic, they are constantly pulling you down. They themselves will not take any steps forward to be able to improve the substance of our democracy and our lives. But those few that come up, we must attack them from morning to evening. So that's the call to them. If you're not going to be any worthwhile to our democracy, maybe just die. So that the Ghanaian can have a chance to live in dignity.
What was the reaction when you posted that?
Oh, I think that obviously my posts divide and they also get this thing in equal measure. But for me, it's always, I write to challenge. And I want the person to come and read something and be challenged, whether they agree with me or not. If they, it is easy for most people not to deal with it by saying, this NDC man.
Very casual. Yes.
But there are those who must ask themselves, okay, what is animating the thinking behind something like this? Maybe, okay, I may not necessarily agree, but I want to take this on more. That's kind of how even when I'm reading things and I'm engaging people, I'm constantly trying to understand what led you to a particular reasoning,
You signed off once, Toby Charlie. Who is Toby Charlie? For those who don't know the Toby Charlie.
I don't know who Toby Charlie is. Can you tell us who Toby Charlie is?
No, I want you to
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Is he not a famous Anglo warrior? Prophet?
One of the things I've talked about is we talk about the how LS moved into Ghana. We talk about Gokoli and things like that. And we don't understand that it means that there's a historical cultural opposition to despotism. Okay? So that the people uprooted their lives because they were against somebody they thought was despotic. That for me means that in the constitutional history of the people, they are against certain systems. And that it is drawing on the symbolism of some of those who are leaders in some regard in terms of that. So I use a lot of that. I use Nehu, means you have to uproot it. Yes. Yeah, a lot of that kind of symbolism. And it gets lost on many people, yes. I understand, but those who know.
Those who know. Before we go, you mentioned that in your Ashaiman detention time that one Ibrahim got killed.
Yes. He died actually recently. So after we left, he was in Sawam prison. I defended him. He got released. And then for some reason, the Ashaman police just kept harassing him. He will be sleeping at 2 a.m. with his wife. And that's their sense of intelligence gathering. Something has happened. So they would go and scatter his room, pull him, take him to the police station, pay some money, we let you go. So this is the first time he called me. The wife also called me. Like, this is completely unacceptable. Got him out. Then it happened the second time as well. So we sued them. In fact, that matter is going to the Supreme Court now. And the story is that he left home and he was shot from the back. So till date, nobody knows who killed him. So they shot him, he was sent to the police hospital. He was released almost the same day to the family. And they told me about it. Then I started talking about it. Then the police went back for his body to now retrieve even bullets on it. This is something that you ought to investigate. So it doesn't have to take somebody knowing the individual for the system to work normally. You know, so that I don't know who killed him. You know, I don't even want to countenance the thought that the fact of suing the police and the individuals involved has anything to do with this. You know,
Is it likely that you get frustrated one day and just leave and never come back?
the closest I came to was when the military descended on Ashama and beat people up. I just listened to how people were dismissive of it. Oh, the people there, they are thieves anyway, or whatever it is. And I was just like, no, this society. I mean, I'm still on roster with the UN. And I kind of thought to myself, what's the point of all of this? It doesn't seem like we're making any progress. It seemed that more and more my activism is misunderstood. People just think of everything through the framework of he just wants a post. And so, yeah, I just kind of felt like, what's the point? Slept off, woke up the next morning, and the way I dealt with that, I started mobilizing young law students to go into Ashaiman to document the stories of people who are dancing, because I said posterity must remember.
How many law students went there?
Oh, we had about 15
And they've documented
people.
quite a few stories.
Oh, yes. We have a treasure trove of videos. People talking about how the people went into the community, how thousands of people were brutalized.
Will it be published somewhere for us to see?
So a lot of that, the idea is it has to be, because the intention is to document it, we want to do it into like a filmography of for people to be able to see what has happened. But that's the only way I dealt with that. And I do hope that I don't lose the faith. I sincerely do. But I think what will be more interesting is that more people take this on, and then when I aspire, that's, you know, it becomes a critical mass of people doing this thing before it becomes too late for our democracy.
And in 50 years' time, when they talk about Oliver Barker-Vormawor, what would you think they would say?
Listen, in 15 years' time, I hope that Ghanaians live a life which is different from the one we have had to live. A life of dignity. Listen, I talk freely about the biggest thing I write always about poverty, because I've lived it, I've seen it. And I've seen folks, you know, I grew up with left behind. I always talk about this, that it's not fair. You know, we only have one chance at this life to see people live that depraved lives. I hope it's not a Ghanaian story in 50 years. That would be worth it, even if our names are not remembered. That society changed somehow.
Who still calls you Mouse?
My mom does. Yeah, and my partner does. Those close to me do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.